Welcome to the regular meeting of council for Monday, January 9th. My name is Mike Little, Mayor for the District of North Vancouver, and so the pleasure falls to me to welcome you all here to our regular meeting. At this time, I'm going to call on Councillor Murray to our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mayor Little. Good evening, everyone. We respectfully acknowledge the original peoples of these lands and waters, specifically the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam, on whose unceded ancestral lands the District of North Vancouver is located. We value the opportunity to learn, share, and serve our community on these unceded lands.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will somebody please move adoption of the agenda? Moved by Councillor Back, second by Councillor Forbes. Call the question on the matter. All those in favor? Contrary minded, motion carries. Thank you very much. Council, as a part of that, there is a set of meeting minutes from the November 7th inaugural meeting of council. Are there any errors or omissions from that?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Murray, seconded by Councillor Back. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded, motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, at the beginning of regular meetings of council, we make a period of up to 30 minutes available for members of the public to come and raise issues of concern to them. Speakers will be given up to 3 minutes to speak to the council. We did create a list ahead of time as people identified themselves to the clerk's department that they wish to speak at tonight's meeting. And so I do have that list. We obviously have a lot of interesting topics tonight because I actually have a full list at this point. And so I'm not expecting to add additional people to the list. But again, if people are brief in their comments, I will do my best to add a couple more at the end, but it depends on whether we go full time or not. So I'll note the time is 7:02. If we get to 7:32, then we'll see where we're at. So the first speaker signed up to speak is Bev Parslow, followed by Peter Coles. And Bev is joining us here in person in the council chamber. I should say that these meetings are being held both in a hybrid format, which means members of council, staff, and the public can participate in this meeting either in person or virtually. And today we have Bev Parslow speaking to us in person, and some of the speakers will be joining us virtually. You'll see them pop up on the side screens as well. But welcome, thank you. And you have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you very much. Dear members of council, I would like to support the motion that council is considering tonight regarding the lowering of speeds in Edgemont Village. The area has a high concentration of shops, banks, cafes, crosswalks, and a great use by pedestrians. The village is a focus for our community. I would propose that we ask 3 questions: the effect on car driving times, the effects of lowering speeds on pedestrians, and finally, what effect a lower speed limit would have on our community. Well, let's look at the car. Assuming that the average commute is in the region of 30 minutes, the distance in Edgemont Village from Ridgewood Drive to West Queens Road is approximately 400 meters. The worst case scenario is it will take between 15 and 20 seconds to drive at 30 rather than 50. The effect on driving time is negligible. I repeat, it will take roughly 15 or 20 seconds. What about the pedestrian? Well, a pedestrian struck by a car at 50 kilometers an hour is 8 times more likely to be killed than a pedestrian hit at 30 kilometers an hour. There is no study I could find that concludes faster speeds are safer for pedestrians. Pedestrians are safer at a slower speed. Well, what about the community? Well, research shows that reducing speeds in cities and villages and towns is not a radical thought. Paris, Brussels, Edmonton, Bilbao, Seattle, Portland, New York, and other cities in the world have all done this. The effects have been that communities have increased pedestrian safety, reduced traffic emissions, improved health, reduced noise, and brought back a human-centered design to the city. The focus is ensuring that people, not vehicles, have optimum mobility rights. I would like to thank Councillor Muri for presenting the motion. Thank you.
Your comments, Bev Parslow. Next speaker I have is Peter Coles, followed by Don Mavenik. Peter Coles is joining us here in person. Welcome. And you have 3 minutes to address the council.
Congratulations to Mayor and Council on your being elected and re-elected.
Thank you.
Peter Coles, 1030 20th Street East. Mayor and Council, since the cycling lanes were installed on 29th Street East over 3 years ago, many residents have been faced with accessibility challenges, especially those with mobility impairments. Handy-Dart paratransit buses, taxis, and home care providers can no longer legally stop or park on sections of 29th Street East. The residents that have to rely on parking access via lanes were stranded during a recent snow event, as current district policy is not to plow or salt lanes. With limited parking on side streets near 29th Street East, the option of alternative parking is next to nil. Based on figures supplied by the district transportation section, usage of the cycling lanes continues to be very low. The City of North Van's Upper Levels Greenway cycling path, which will parallel sections of the 29th Street East cycling lanes, is slated to be developed in 2023. No doubt usage on 29th Street East cycling lanes will be even lower with this option. District staff have publicly admitted to making errors on 29th Street East, consolidating the bike lanes to one side and reinstating stopping parking on the opposite side would address the challenges for all stakeholders. The width of a single bi-directional cycling lane will be approximately the same width of sections of the cycling highway on Highway 1 between Westview and Capilano Road, which was approved when it was built by the Ministry of Transportation and supported by Hub Cycling. To be clear, this is not about storage of private vehicles on public roads. This is about the basic right of accessibility for residents. The motion coming before Mayor and Council later this evening of removing the delineators and consolidating the cycling lane to one side of 29th Street East is a cost-effective compromise and a reasonable option. Councillor Back, 5 days before the municipal election, you posted on social media that you fully supported addressing the accessibility challenges the residents on 29th Street East are faced with on a daily basis. You, the rest of council, and mayor now have the opportunity to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Peter Coles. The next speaker I have is Don Mavenik, followed by Chris French. And Don Mavenik is joining us here in person. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Councilman. Nice to see you in person and Happy New Year. 2023 will be a better year. Trust me. I have inside information. But any case, I'm Don Mavenik. I'm a retired professor of civil and environmental engineering at the University of British Columbia. I'm a registered professional engineer, although most of my work these days is in the pro bono area. I am a consultant to the Center for Disease Control, and I'm also on the advisory board for the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. So I do a lot of work in the community and I really enjoy it. And I'm here to support the motion by Councillor Muri about the transportation and the traffic study in Edgemont Village. In fact, I'm the one that got started in this thing about 3 years ago. It predates COVID. And one of the things I've been doing since I've been retired is spending more time in the village. I've been in that village now for 49 years. So I've seen a lot of changes. In the last 10 years, that village has changed so much, it's incredible. As a corridor study going through there, you look at bookends, you've got two sets of lights and you've got two major intersections in the middle. And when you see the people that are there, you've got an elementary school. Now there are two daycares on the strip. There's a supermarket. We have a senior citizen center, and we have a lot more people who are moving in who are downsizing from their homes. And the people are moving through there, and there's a wide variety of people, and everybody seems to be in a hurry, including the people who are walking and the people who are driving through there. And one of the things that I noticed, and I think I agree with Lisa, is that A lot of people have big rigs they're driving through, their trucks, pickup trucks, vans and so forth, and SUVs, and they really move through there quickly. Not all times of the day, but they're doing delivery trucks and so forth. And so something has to be done before there's a tragedy there. We've had a lot of close calls. One just has to contact the RCMP in North Van, and you'll see how many people have called in. They've been closely, been scared by the traffic and so forth, and some accidents. And so what we're proposing to start with is do a one-year study and look at how are we going to make the changes in there. It's all, in my opinion, it revolves around, I put this in writing actually, and you have a copy, that we do 30 kilometers an hour in that Edgemont corridor between the two sets of lights. That would be accompanied by raised crosswalks at the two intersections, east-west only. And the reason being because you're not going to get the police there all the time to put up a radar trap. You can put all the rules and regulations you want. I've seen this. And a good example of that is down on Squamish Nation. On that back road from the foot of Capilano over to Park Royal, the back doors we call it, they have a school there. They've had 30 kilometers an hour, but people were still speeding. So they went ahead and they put the elevated, and that's really slowed down. I didn't realize how much it slows it down until I was there the other day, but it really works well. And I've talked to the council, the Squamish Nation, and they're just saying that's worked much better than they would have used. So that's our starting point. There are many other things which I've already put in writing, and I won't go any further, but we have too much at stake. We don't want to see the village messed up. It really is a nice place to live and work. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Don Mavedek. Next speaker I have is Chris French, followed by Duncan Wilcock. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Good evening, Mayor Little and members of council. My name is Chris French. I live here in the district of North Vancouver. I'd first like to say that I'm really in favor of the 30-kilometer-hour slow speed zone pilot in Edgemont Village. I think it's going to make it a lot safer for pedestrians that are shopping, visiting from all over the North Shore and even beyond. So thank you, Councillor Mayor, for bringing forward that motion. I really do appreciate it. However, I am here more so tonight to express that I'm against the removal of and in favor of keeping the bike lane on East 29th Street. I'm an urban planner and a graduate student at UBC focusing on sustainable transportation. But let's take that about me away. And I'd actually maybe like to suggest that we all just pause for a moment and take away the titles that we all have and what we do or what we have done. We are humans, neighbors, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, partners, husbands, wives, community members, living in and moving throughout the district of North Vancouver, trying to get where we need to go and get there safely. I believe that everyone, no matter how they choose to get places, deserves to get there as quickly, efficiently, and safely as possible. Some people in our community, like myself, simply cannot afford to operate a vehicle on the daily to get to work or school, complete errands, or visit friends or family. I'm a student. Trust me, I just paid my tuition yesterday. It was awful. So we resort to other more affordable means of getting where we need to go, like by taking transit or riding a bicycle. Now, the common argument against bicycle infrastructure in North America is, why build it? No one rides their bike. Or in the case of East 29th, that no one is riding here. Well, I do. I know others here that do. We're there. The report's conclusion calls for balance between different road users and to not negatively one group over another. While I do agree with trying to find balance in most cases, I do not believe that any consideration should be made when the lives of people traveling through our community are at stake. We need to protect and look out for those moving through our streets and not make it more unsafe for them. Everyone who was elected in fall 2022 responded to Hub Cycling's municipal election survey. And in that survey, everyone responded that they will be a champion for active transportation in our community. So I ask that to not just council, but community members here as well. Does taking away a painted bike lane for the idea of reinstating parking spaces for homes that have driveways or other off-street parking while increasing the lives of people traveling through our community make us champions for active transportation? To me, it does not, and represents a step in the wrong direction. Reverting this back to a shared lane will leave our neighbors, friends, and district community members who ride bicycles more vulnerable to collisions with vehicles and an infrastructure gap in the North Vancouver Bicycle Master Plan between William and Frome. I strongly encourage members of council to vote against this motion to remove the delineators and bike lanes. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris French. Next speaker I have is Duncan Wilcock, followed by Heather Druget.
Good evening, everyone.
Welcome, Duncan Wilcock.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to provide public input and participate in the democratic process. I live in the valley and travel the bike lanes around the North Shore with my 4-year-old regularly, riding by himself and riding with me on the back of my bike. I sent a couple of emails with some photos, so given a bit of input. What I want to add newly is I actually first want to start by expressing my support for that and thanking Councillor Murray for the motion for the 30-kilometer zone in Edgemont Village. I'll mention, contrary to the belief of some, I think it'll increase revenue for these shops, which I think is good. It's been shown time and time again. A good local example of that is the Whistler Pedestrian Village. A lot of revenue happening there in a pedestrian space that a lot of people like to travel to. Bev Parcelo gave me the statistics that I like to quote as well, and I'm excited to see that pilot in Edgemont, and I hope we see it in other parts of the DNV soon. Support of that. You've hopefully already seen a lot of my input, as I mentioned in the emails. Removing even part of the network breaks a network, right? If you remove a small section, suddenly how do you get from there to there safely, as the prior person was mentioning? A network like this addresses the climate emergency the DNV has declared and offers transportation to many options to many who don't drive, like the person before me there, Chris French. I do drive too, and it's not only myself, but my 4-year-old son who rides himself to daycare. Don't build the bike lanes for me. Build it for my son and build them for the 15 to 25-year-olds riding Lime bikes around the city, or people like Chris French, who has not yet been able to buy a car, as I'm lucky enough to be able to have, and for insure all the insurance issues. Certainly don't remove them or make them less useful by forcing the crossings of 2 car lanes, such as Mr. Cole suggested, even though I recognize the spirit of compromise that he came in. It also surprises me to see this motion signed by Councillor Murray, who had endorsed the Hub cycling platform in her election less than 1 month before this motion was drafted in the report to Council on the 14th November. I'll read from the Hub policy that she endorsed, which was: the reduction of parking is an important step to shift towards active transportation. Given that Council and the district already went through the painful process of working through that process a few years ago, to see this motion, which is exactly the opposite, I find very puzzling. So most definitely do not remove a section of bike lane to benefit a few when the bike lane there offers benefits to so many in the community and across the region. I mentioned the 15 to 25-year-olds on Lime bikes, so I see riding around all the time, and I just think it's fantastic to see that they have that freedom to move, even though cars are expensive and insurance is expensive. Those are my comments. Thank you very much for all your public service work, and I appreciate the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Duncan Wilcock. Next speaker I have is Heather Drugib, followed by Giacomo Falorni.
Mayor and Council,
Welcome.
thank you. My name is Heather Druget. I live at 354 22nd Street East, and tonight I'm speaking on behalf of Hub North Shore. Generally speaking, transportation research divides people into 4 types of cyclists. So first, there's like 1% of people who are the strong and fearless, and those are people who are going to bike with limited or no bicycle-specific infrastructure. Then comes like a 7% of enthused and confident people. Those are people who are willing to bike if there's bicycle-specific infrastructure in place, like painted lines and sharrows. Then you get a massive group of people. 60% of people are interested but concerned. In other words, these are people who'd be willing to bicycle if high-quality bike infrastructure existed. Then, of course, you're always going to get 30% of people who say, you know, no way, no how, I'm not going to bike. And these are people who are unwilling to bike no matter what the quality of the infrastructure is in place. Physical separation reduces what transportation planners call the level of traffic stress. The more traffic stress that people experience, the less likely they are to ride at all. On an arterial like 29th, to reduce the stress and encourage ridership, physical separation between the bike lane and the vehicle lane with reasonably heavy traffic volumes and high motor speeds is necessary to attract that 60% of people who are interested but concerned. If you are interested in shifting the mode share from vehicles to active transportation to reduce traffic, then the 60% of the interested but concerned must feel safe. And removing the delineators between William and from will increase people's stress levels with the likely net effect of reducing ridership along the whole corridor. If the district removes the delineators, you would be essentially reducing safety. And this may be important from a liability point of view in the future, especially if a person riding were hurt in that segment. So for this reason, we're basically asking that if you do find an alternate route, we feel that it's quite important that that route be designed and constructed prior to removing the existing separated section. And finally, thank you very much for all of you for signing Hub's Safe Cycling Pledge prior to the election. We really appreciate your support for safe cycling in the District of North Vancouver. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker I have is Giacomo Falorni, followed by Mitchell Stuckey. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council, for taking my input. I am here to speak against the motion to removing the infrastructure, the bike infrastructure on East 29th Street. I sent an email last night, actually, and I want to apologize perhaps to Councillor Murray and Forbes that it was a bit pointed, because I feel very strongly about this, about bike infrastructure in general, because it touches me personally. So it's not personal. But as I said, I do feel strongly about this. I made several points in the email, not least of which is that we're in a climate emergency right now. And so we need to do everything. I feel we need to do everything to enhance and improve and incentivize cycling in our community. For myself, I'm part of a 4-person household. We have, I have 2 daughters, a wife, a dog, so 5-person household, I guess. But we have 1 car, and we recently bought an e-bike. And I love that e-bike. I really enjoy riding that e-bike. And for me, I use it as much as I can. I rode tonight to come here, and it flattens hills. It makes it easy to get around. And the biggest issue, as Heather said, is we need to feel comfortable riding. And there's some roads some places where you just don't feel comfortable. If you're in the middle of traffic, you don't feel comfortable riding. So, the biggest issue is safety. So whenever, I see infrastructure that keeps safe, that keeps us safe, I think that's the way to go. We need to do everything possible to incentivize cycling. And as I said, there's many reasons to do it. And I don't think it's, for transportation, when we talk about transportation, I think that roads are for moving people from one place to another, not for parking cars. So I just want to speak against this motion. And on a separate topic, and I thank Councillor Murray, I am in favor of the 30-kilometer speed limit in Edgemont. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giacomo Falorni. Next speaker I have is Mitchell Stuckey, followed by Emma Campbell. And I believe Mitchell Stuckey is joining us virtually here, so I'll just check in with staff. Is Mitchell Stuckey connected to the meeting?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. Yeah, my name is Mitchell Stuckey. I live in Upper Lonsdale, and I want to speak to point 8.5, that I'm against removing the delineators. I cycle a lot in North Vancouver. I have an e-cargo bike that I put my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old on frequently, and I was just biking on this bike lane on Sunday. And if the delineator were removed, I would never bike there with my kids. It would be way too dangerous to be sharing the road with the cars, and I wouldn't go. And I just want I would like to see the district moving towards more bike lanes instead of taking them away. And I do feel for, if anybody has accessibility issues who lives along there, where part of the kind of reasoning for removing them is to make sure that like there's handy dart accessibility. I think that that could absolutely be factored in while retaining the bike lanes. We're talking about returning parking, which certainly would mean storage for personal vehicles. Where I live in Upper Lonsdale, there aren't even sidewalks to walk. I walk my kid every day to school, 5 blocks, and we don't touch a sidewalk. I'm in a road walking on like just there with my kid. It's cars are ripping through. It's so dangerous to get around here if you don't have a car, and it's pretty frustrating. I would love to see a big, broad movement for safer infrastructure for all pedestrians and cyclists. I don't think the bike lanes in the district are very great right now, and I think that saying that, oh, they're not used that much is kind of like, well, we haven't really tried to make them great. Like that previous speaker is saying, 60% of people want great infrastructure before they'll feel comfortable to do it. So I feel comfortable biking when there's a painted line or something like that, but not everyone does. We have to be moving towards like a district and city and community where there is much more options than single occupancy vehicles. We have to move away from cars, and removing bike lanes and adding more parking for more cars is moving backwards for everything that I think we know that this district knows and understands we have to move towards for a climate emergency and all of those things. I just want to say too, I do also support 8.4, the 30-kilometer speed limit in Edgemont. I think that's a wonderful idea. So thanks for bringing that forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mitchell Stuckey. The next speaker I have is Emma Campbell, followed by Ben Holt. And I don't have a note as to whether Emma Campbell's in person or virtual. I have staff check and see if Emma Campbell is on the virtual side of the meeting. Okay, we'll double check again, but at this point, I don't see an Emma Campbell attached to the meeting, and so I will return to the list. The next speaker that I have is Ben Holt, followed by Eric Jensen. And welcome, Ben Holt.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Ben Holt. I live on St. Albans Avenue, and I wish to speak to the motion regarding the removal of the bike lane on 29th and against that motion. I noted, having reviewed the report, that there's no quantifiable information to support the removal of the bike lane, so I've spent a little bit of time looking into it and would like to provide that. First off, looking at which properties are likely to be affected. Looking along 29th, I note that between William and Macefield, there are 2 houses, neither of which are affected because both have off-street parking accessible from 29th. Between Macefield and St. Christopher's, there are 9 houses, 0 of which are affected. 8 of the houses that have a 29th Street address all have off-street parking accessible from 29th. And a 9th house with a Macefield address has a driveway accessible from 29th. Between St. Christopher's and From, there are 9 houses. 3 houses have off-street parking accessible from 29th. 1 additional house has off-street parking accessible from St. Christopher's. And the house at the corner of 29th and From has on-street parking accessible from From. There are 4 affected houses having off-street parking accessible from the lane directly behind the houses. So only 4 houses are being adversely affected by the bike lane in the way that the proposal would address. Now, looking at the different routes that are suggested, the existing route between 29th and William to the Lynn Valley Center, it's 700 meters, and there are 2 traffic lights, 1 at either end. The proposed alternative, which was to go south on William and then along Lynn Valley Road, is 1,430 meters, twice the distance, and it has 6 traffic lights. So it's not nearly as good a route. I'd like to remind Council that in July of 2019, you declared a climate emergency. That 37% of the emissions put out in British Columbia are done through transportation. We need to reduce those numbers. We need to do it as quickly and urgently as possible. Okay? Declaring a climate emergency should not have been a performative action. It should have been something that was followed up with actual things being done to bring down our emissions to align them with the sciences of climate change. I realize that this is only a short section of the bike route, but it's important. We need to be building out active transportation alternatives very quickly. We're not doing that. In fact, I've heard that we can expect that the bike lane to Deep Cove will take about a decade to build out. That's simply not at all appropriate. We need to be moving much quicker. We can't allow 4 properties to scuttle these sorts of efforts. If that's the sort of barrier we're willing to accept, we should just throw up our arms and forget the whole process. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments, Ben Holt. I will just double check in before I go to Eric Jensen. Just want to check in, was Emma Campbell identified on the virtual call? Okay, so Emma Campbell is not part of the meeting then tonight. So the last speaker is Eric Jensen, joining us in person. Welcome, Eric Jensen.
Hello, everybody, Mayor, Council. Nice to see everybody in person. My name is Eric Jensen, and I'm here tonight to talk to you about the impact that the District of North Vancouver stormwater management bylaws have had and are currently having on my family. In December of 2021, my wife and I looked at buying a property at 4567 Valley Road in Lynn Valley. I'm an experienced builder. I've been doing this for a long time. We made sure that there was no development permit areas on this property clean. I also researched to see where the DNV stormwater main was in the boulevard. It was deep enough that we should be able to gravity drain the drain tile for the home with a 3-level home, no problem. It should have been and should be a very straightforward property to build on. About us, we're a family of 4. We're long-term residents of the North Shore, 30 plus years. We've been property owners, my wife and I, since 2007. I am the owner of Spruce Hill Contracting. We're local. I'm a member of the Home Builders Association since 2010. I'm on the Government Relations Committee. I'm a member of the Builder and Renovator Council with them. I've built 7 homes and I've renovated more than 670 of them. Our original goals with the home was to build a 3-level home with a basement suite. Short term, the basement suite was supposed to be a place for my mother-in-law who's aging to live with us so that we could care for her as she goes into her older years. Long term, that was going to be headquarters for Leanne and I while we traveled and did whatever we wanted to do, renting out the upper floor to another family that needed more space than just the 2 of us once our kids move out. Well, hopefully move out. A rough timeline of where things are at. We submitted our original permit application in mid-March. We then were asked to do civil engineering, which is a whole nother topic of conversation. But anyways, we submitted that on June 10th. We received a rejection notice from district staff on August 26th. We were advised at that time that any home with a basement in this area would need to be tanked. Our civil engineer said that tanking is something that should only be done for parkades. It's not something that they suggest or recommend for long-term homes. So we decided to redesign the home without a basement. As an aside, we still don't have a permit, by the way. As an aside, friends of ours submitted a permit application in Coquitlam around the same time that we did. They moved into their house in mid-November. Currently, we're trying to get a home permit for a 2-level home, no basement or basement suite. The cost to redesign and re-engineer the home has been approximately $25,000. We still don't have a permit. I'm hoping one is imminent. We're tying up 2 homes for 1 family. Our geotechnical and civil engineers are as confused as we are as to why all of this stormwater management is needed. Doesn't make sense. Costs are high. There's many families that I've talked to that are suffering from this as well. 2 more seconds. Tonight, I'm asking you to please consider voting to undo the amendments of the district bylaws that have been done over the past 2 years, reset the stormwater management plan, engage with people like myself or associations like Haven to come up with a comprehensive set of guidelines that are easy to understand and execute for people in the community. Civil engineers shouldn't be needed to build a single family residence. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for your comments, Eric Jensen. It is always a challenge for municipalities to manage the the ingress into our stormwater management in some neighborhoods have a more pressing challenge than others, depending on their topography and hydrology in the neighborhood. And so we do leave it to our professional engineers to come up with recommendations on that. Okay, we have elapsed the time for the public input period for this evening's meeting. Unfortunately, there were several other people who had expressed an interest to speak at tonight's meeting. I always encourage people, you're welcome to send a note to council. Emails are always welcome and recorded, become part of the public records and some of these matters. And so it's, if you're not able to get through the speakers list, that there are other opportunities for you to share your views with council. At this time, council, I'm going to resume the regular meeting agenda. And at this point, we're going to be moving on to regular business. Item 8.1 is the rezoning for the proposed cannabis retail store at Unit 124, 1100 Lynn Valley Road. And at this point, I'm going to go to staff for a comment.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. Nimbus Cannabis has applied for a text amendment to the zoning bylaw to allow a retail cannabis store in Unit 124 of the Lynn Valley Center Mall. The store is approximately 1,100 square feet and consists of a sale and display area, staff lounge, storage area, and bathroom. The proposed unit is located at the rear portion of the mall with an exterior entrance opening onto the adjacent parking area. Although the unit does connect with the internal mall, no access to the main shopping area would be provided. The proposed site has been reviewed against the locational guidelines and evaluation criteria of the district's non-medical retail cannabis policy and is fully compliant. For instance, the site is located in Lynn Valley Town Center, where no other cannabis retail stores have previously been approved. It is zoned to allow a liquor store use and is located in excess of 200 meters from any elementary or high school property. In addition, the site and store layout has also been reviewed by the Provincial Liquor and Cannabis Branch and complies with the provincial cannabis licensing regulations regarding store layout and store security. The public was notified of the application through a mail-out consisting of 1,385 notices delivered to neighbors in an area exceeding 100 meters of the mall property, and through the installation of 2 notification signs on the property. One sign was installed directly outside Unit 124 the main entrance, and the other at the entrance to the parking area on Conifer Street, which was visible to traffic and pedestrians entering and leaving the mall at this intersection. The notification was done in accordance with our non-statutory public consultation for development applications policy. If the policy receives first reading tonight from council and is referred to a public hearing, additional statutory public notification will be undertaken in accordance with our development procedure bylaw and the Local Government Act. Based on the proposal's compliance with the non-medical retail cannabis policy, staff recommend that the rezoning bylaw 8607 is given first reading and is referred to a public hearing. Thank you for your time, and that concludes my introduction, and I'm happy to answer any questions council may have. And I'll just mention that the applicant is also attending the meeting virtually and is available to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Veers. I'll be moving the staff recommendation that it be given first reading and that the matter be referred to a public hearing. Is there a seconder on the matter? Councillor Hanson. Just my own comments on it. You know, the comment about proximity to schools is actually a really important one in Lynn Valley. You know, think about it, but between Waldorf, Boundary, Frome, Lynn Valley Elementary, Ross Road, and down at Eastview, and with the 200-meter exclusion zones around there, there's actually very few commercial properties that could qualify without an exemption on the school distance in Lynn Valley. It actually becomes quite a small area that they could potentially go into. The mall site with its own external entrance, not an internal entrance, I think is a reasonable way to make it so that people that are there are choosing to be there. So I think that it's met the test to go to the public for public comment. And so I'll be supporting first reading and supporting that the matter be referred to a public hearing. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I agree with the comments of Mayor Little. I'm very pleased to refer this resorting to a public hearing. I note that in the district at this time, we have already approved 4 cannabis retail sites, 1 in Seymour, 1 in the Lynn Creek area, and 2 in the Lions Gate neighborhood. I recently voted against a rezoning for a 3rd site in the Lions Gate area. I felt that it would be more prudent to have a better geographic distribution of the cannabis stores, and also that there perhaps was another service that was more urgently needed in that particular site in Lions Gate. I note, and this is important to our consideration, that there is no cannabis store in Lynn Valley. This major neighborhood town center, growing town center, does not have a cannabis store. It complies, as staff have pointed out, with the policy of the district and also the provincial policy. The mall has a liquor store. This particular cannabis store would be within, I'm thinking, 100 feet of the liquor store. And it would seem to be highly appropriate that a location that has such a well-developed liquor store would also have a cannabis retail outlet. I am aware that there are some community members who oppose this rezoning and believe that a cannabis shop is not appropriate for this site and is not congruent or supportive of the neighborhood feel. I certainly respect those views, but given the legal status of recreational cannabis, I do not believe a basis we can have a basis for discrimination against cannabis shops of this type. The RCMP has raised no objections, and there have been no infractions to bylaws observed at existing cannabis sites within the district. So I look forward to this coming back to public hearing, and as I say again, note the geographic need for a cannabis store in the Lynn Valley area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Little. Mr. Various, could you just tell me again how many notices we sent out?
Through your worship to Councillor Murray, we sent out 1,385, I believe.
We sent out 1,385 notices, but we decided to only put up 2 signs.
That's a question?
Maybe it's rhetorical. What's the street that the second sign was put on?
Through your worship to Councillor Murray, the second sign was located on Conifer Street, which is the entrance from Mountain Highway into the parking area. So at the corner of Conifer and corner of where the parking area to the mall is begins.
So there were no signs put on 27th, Mountain Highway, Lynn Valley Road. Might have saved a little bit of, maybe saved some postage with those 1,385 notices that we sent out. Anyway, that's it is about accessing information to the community, and I do, to Mr. Stewart, think we need to look at those signs again. I have no concern with sending this to public hearing, and I'll be interested in hearing the community's thoughts on this issue.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Murray. Councillor Forbes, your comments?
Thank you, Worship. I live about, well, I live down on Kirkstone, so I'm close to the Lynn Valley Mall. Some of my concerns are similar to Councillor Murray's. This was brought forward in notification at the back of the mall in May. I believe the signs were left up for 2.5 to 3 weeks. It was right before the May long weekend, and a lot of people don't go to the back of the mall. So in fact, the back of the mall, all of the back side of that parking is for staff. So there's not much public parking back there. And the people who did go there usually were people that were trying to come in from the back and go to the liquor store and right back out without dealing with all the hassle at the front. So I have the same concern as Councillor Murray, that I think that was highly inappropriate, or not inappropriate, but not the best use of where to locate signs. Library Lane and Conifer is almost like you have to take a block off, and it's almost like going in as if you were putting signage up in a cul-de-sac off of main roads. And when we had two main roads that we could have put notification up, have the same concerns. I am also concerned that I know we're within the regulations to do that, but I have already notified our liaison that I'm bringing forward a report to deal with the signage, to deal with the notification distance, and I will be bringing that forward. The other concerns that I have there are that I think that I went up to the mall, specifically walked all around it, and there's no new signage up saying this is coming before council on Monday. And I do think that although we're not required to do that, I think when something is this far out from when the first notification was done, that we should go above what's required, not just do what is necessary. And we should have had some kind of notification out to the public again. So I'll be addressing that as well when I bring the report forward. I just wanted to say about the comment in there that the LVCA had not responded with comments from them. I reached out to the LVCA on the weekend, and I reached out to 2 members. And it turns out that this didn't go on any of their agendas for the simple reason that they have a very, very small board at the moment and have for a while. And they just didn't have the capacity to reach out to the community. And so that's why there wasn't a response. So it's not that they felt one way or another, they don't know what the community feels. So I have recommended to them that they notify us if they can't reach out to the community in the future, so that we don't think that maybe that means no answer means they're okay with it. The one other comment I would make, is being a Lynn Valley resident, there are a lot of smaller type stores that the residents want in that mall. And although the district doesn't have control over who leases that area from the mall, I do think that we can pay attention a little bit more to trying to have a more diverse set of stores that are in the mall. I mean, I'd love to have a hardware store back in Lynn Valley. I miss Woodstock. I don't like having to go all the way down to Canadian Tire to get hardware, or to Rona. So my problem is more with the process that we got there. I think we could do better. I'm going to try and bring back that report, and hopefully we do. But generally speaking, I'm always in favor of listening to the community about what the community who's on the front line around something wants. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Veers, can I just have you clarify what kind of advertising will be involved in the public hearing, in the lead up to the public hearing for this type of a motion?
Your worship, typical notification for public hearing requires notice to usually the same properties that were notified at the non-statutory notice, and also notice in the paper, two editions of the North Shore News, and signage on site. I believe it's 2 signs, and there's additional signs could be added as well if that's deemed necessary.
I think it would be reasonable to at least pick up one of the major streets that access the space, so that people going through that area are aware of it. But I'm satisfied that that's the standard for a public hearing notification in this case. I think people in our community are very well aware of the debates around cannabis shops in the community, and shouldn't be shocked about this. This isn't the first time. It is the first one being proposed for Lynn Valley, but I think that that's adequate signage, although I do think you need to pick up one of the main streets around there in the process. I see now Councillor Ma, your comments.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I first want to acknowledge the public feedback that was received in the subsequent email to council. I did review the material. I also note that this application does conform with our current district policy. I feel that the applicant has addressed some of the concerns from a design perspective, specifically the entrance from the back of the mall, and there's no direct entrance or exit to and from the mall. And thank you to Councilor Forbes for clarifying the so-called non-objection from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. But I do note that the police have not objected to this application. I will support the first option to give first reading and to go to public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ma. Councillor Pope, your comments. May I just confirm your microphone's on?
Yeah,
There we go.
I'm prepared to support this motion and support the staff recommendation to put it forward to a public hearing. I'd really like to hear from more people and the people who live in that area, especially in the immediate area. I did read through all of the correspondence that we received on it, and I must say that I am concerned about making it easier for teenagers to get cannabis, especially with Argyle High School close by. I do, however, know that teenagers will find a way to get it anyway, no matter how far away it is. And I think it's favorable that people could be walking to the store instead of getting in their cars, travel to the store, potentially get high, and then drive in their cars back to Lynn Valley. So I would like to hear more on this, and but for now, we'll support it to move forward.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Pope. I see no further speakers on the matter, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Just want to check in with the clerk. We have said that it'll be referred to a public hearing. We haven't set a date in the report of any kind. Are you contemplating a particular date, or when will this come back for public hearing?
You're correct, Your Worship. We do not have a date planned yet. It needs to be about 3 to 4 weeks out, which would put it in the certainly the first half of February. Not quite sure. Maybe we'll try to target maybe Tuesday, February 7th. No commitment, but we'll try.
Is that Family Day weekend the day before?
I would have to check. I think it's probably the weekend after that. Yeah, it's later in the month.
Okay. Well, we'll confirm that. So what that means is that we haven't officially set the date for it, and so you're going to have to monitor the newspaper, which will have 2 postings of it in the North Shore News, plus also the District of North Vancouver website when our agendas are published in the Wednesday, Thursday before the council meeting. You'll have to monitor those in order to be certain of the time. Plus also we'll have signboards on location that can direct you to when that public hearing is going to take place. Okay, council, moving on to item 8.2. This is the voting transparency report. Just before I go into the report, it just so happens that on tonight's agenda, there are 2 reports that are co-signed by councillors. If we do that in the future, it'd be great to know who owns it. We need one person to be in charge of it because I'm going to come to them to make the motion. So in this case, on voting transparency, I'm coming to Catherine Pope to speak to the item first and to be the one to make the motion on the matter. So Councillor Pope, your comments.
Thank you very much, Mayor Little. Well, during the election, I heard from
Microphone.
Sorry.
There we go.
Excuse me, I've got that nasty cough. During the election, when I was door knocking and attending many of the public events, I heard from so many people, average people, who do not know how councillors voted on certain issues. This may have led to voter apathy and a low voter turnout of only 22% in the District of North Van. We tend to wonder why young people don't vote, but I can tell you a story about a couple I met in Delbrook, 70 and 80 years old, voted in every single election, didn't vote in this one. Why? They found it too hard to figure out what the truth was and which councillors had stood for what and how they'd actually voted versus what they were saying. So providing transparency in voting decisions by council is fundamental to democracy and accountability. People must be able to hold us accountable for our decisions. in order to maintain their trust in government. The system we have right now is just not cutting it. The voting records are there, they're recorded manually, and we can find them later in the minutes of meetings, or if we want to sift through videos, a couple of hours. But when I was trying to find out who voted for what in the campaign, I spent an excessive amount of time going through North Shore News stories, thanks to the North Shore News for covering these important decisions and recording the votes. And that was how I was able to come to certain conclusions. So the recommendation that I worked on with Councillor Back is asking staff to look at simply creating a page on a website that will detail how each councillor votes on certain important issues. It's not new. Lots of other jurisdictions are doing it, including the City of Vancouver, and they've been doing it for years. In fact, the City of Vancouver has now integrated their software so that the votes are automatically recorded and are recorded electronically. So this would cut down on staff resources of manually inputting data. And this recommendation enables our staff to allocate the staffing and resources to look into this and provide us with some costing for the software. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Pope. Councillor Back, you're going to be seconding the motion?
I will second the motion. Thank you, Your Worship. Not too much to add to what's in the report and to Councillor Pope's comments. It really is about transparency and making it easier for people to go and access voting records, which I think do show where council stands on different issues. We make a lot of comments around this table every week, but it really does come down to how we vote. And I think the issue of voter turnout that Councillor Pope raised is an important one. People need to be able to easily access that information so that they can kind of see what various councillors' attitudes and values were around certain issues. So I also think this can be fairly straightforward. There are, if you've looked at any of the links and examples from other municipalities, varying degrees of sophistication in terms of the actual tool. It can be as simple as just really a spreadsheet, or it can be a tool that you can sort and look at different themes, such as housing or climate, to see how various votes went. But I do think it would add to our level of transparency and make it simpler to find this information. And I know we need to and are looking to do that in a number of areas on our website, but I think this would be a really important one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just thank you for making your opening comments, Councillor Pope. I had a follow-up question, if I may. So to clarify, you're wanting a like Vancouver, where on the night live there is a tally recorded in a digital format and placed directly on our live stream or on our screens here. Because when I read the report, I was thinking that you were talking about like annually summarizing the votes, but you're talking about a live tally of the voting. Is that correct?
Or you go ahead first.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it would be on a regular basis. I don't know if that necessarily has to be in real time, but I think staff can look at that if this motion is supported tonight, but more regularly than annually or monthly, that type of thing.
Okay.
Follow up on that by just saying, this is why we need to staff to sort of look at the costing, because that's probably what Vancouver City Council does is probably like the primo version of the software, with that instant, click here and it votes recorded and comes up on the screen, versus, at the very minimum, we should have a simple website that's updated on some kind of regular basis, like once a week or once a month, something like that.
Well, thank you very much. And I just want to, so when this technology, there's these little boxes here that help us unmute and mute. When this technology was selected for the council chamber, it was intentionally done for the ability to do electronic voting in future. There are some challenges with our commitment to hybrid, where if somebody is at home, they don't have access to this site, and so their vote would not be recorded electronically in the same way. And so we're trying to work out whether there's some widget in the system or some technology to overcome that slight imbalance in how the voting is recorded. I know that at the time when we have, so for the live recording, when it looks like it's a close vote, like a 3-4 vote or something like this, I typically will verify with the clerk in the moment to make sure that the clerk's count matches my count. And if it looks like it's a unanimous or consent sort of item, then I do tend to move on relatively quickly. So in that case, we would stop all of those consent type items and we would post it up on the screen. And so that would add time for those consent items. But it will have some meeting management challenges, but I kind of like to see it in operation. So I guess my question to Mr. Stewart would be, how capable is the current technology that we have installed? We did the update last summer, and also what would we need to do to address the longer term issue, or do you need us to pass this in order to give you enough time to research those items?
Your worship, sorry. Your worship, the clerk and I have already discussed this, and if it was something as simple as a spreadsheet that we could post on the web page periodically, that would be fairly simple. Moving to a complete live system where we're actually tallying it, that might be a little more challenging. And I would appreciate perhaps the comments from the mover and the seconder with respect to the purpose, because in many cases, I've seen people vote for and against something for completely different reasons. And that's one of the weaknesses of the system, is that if somebody's going into an election and somebody's tallying this up, they may not have a really true picture as to why somebody's voting pattern is the way it is. If we had to move into actually recording intent, that may get a little more complicated, but we'll look at all this and report back to council.
I think the point you're making is that someone may vote for a bike lane or against a bike lane, and they may have completely on different projects, but that doesn't mean they don't necessarily support bike lanes. Maybe that's a bad example given tonight's discussion, but it's just to say that the reason someone may vote on something, they may vote against something because the peak eve height is 3 feet too tall and therefore the variance doesn't interest them, but they're generally in support of coach houses or some other thing. So it's not always going to give you the picture of why someone voted the way they voted.
That happens quite often in development, where you have councillors voting in a certain manner for completely different reasons. And so you can't really intuit what their intent was when they voted that. So we just got to be careful and to make that kind of a disclaimer that this is what it is. Otherwise, it could get very complicated if we had to start to ascribe intent and from council's comments.
Okay, the next speaker I have is Councillor Ma. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hanson. Sorry, you were up first. Sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very pleased to support the motion, and I thank Councillor Back and Councillor Pope for bringing it forward. I absolutely agree with the comment that it can be challenging for members of the public to understand where some of us stand, and any clarity that we can bring over that will obviously improve the democratic process and the electoral process. The one observation I would make, and it is consistent with some of our recent, very last few minute discussions around this. I took it that the goal is to create a set of data that the public can use to identify where councillors stand on the issues. And I did look at White Rock and City of Vancouver, Richmond, and I'm of Victoria. I can't say that I spent a lot of time, but my concern is that unless we go about this carefully, we're not going to come up with something that's simple enough and easy enough for people to use. It's just going to be one more complicated set of information that isn't really going to advance us. So I look forward to the staff recommendation. I hope we're able to come up with something that's simple enough that it actually does capture people's voting records on the issues in a way that is meaningful to voters. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Ma.
Thank you to Councillor Pope and Councillor Back for bringing this forward. I believe that elected officials should be accountable for the decisions that they make. As Councillor Pope said, that this is part of our democracy, and putting our voting records online would be a positive step forward. However, as our CAO and Mayor Little has mentioned, the key is how that voting records recorded and accessible. As someone with some marketing research background, how data is presented is almost as important as what data is presented. And also to ensure that the current work that the DNB Digital Services and IT department's working on with respect to the OCP dashboard is not held up. If this report is supported, I recommend that each project is treated separately and not kind of thrown all together, because this will slow it down. So thank you. I will support this.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. Councillor Murray.
We have our voting records on our website, but it's a challenge on a daily basis to try to find those motions and those records for many people. It is not a simple, easy couple of clicks. Nanaimo, I found quite easily. White Rock, I'm still looking, can't find theirs. So I take Councillor Hanson's point that let's not add something even more complicated to the system. So we're pulling the rest of our hair out. But, I have no problem, as Mr. Stewart suggested, that we put something up on the website that's on the first page. In the last month, this is the votes that were done on, council agendas. But it's important to know that there's always nuances by in favor and opposed. And that's where, you sort of have to be involved in what's going on in the community and pay attention to what's going on in the community and know who you've elected and know who's making these decisions in this chamber, why they're voting for what they're voting for and why they don't, because there's always there's always a lot more to it than just yay or nay. So I have no problem with adding something simple. I think the technology like Vancouver, I'm aware of Vancouver's, it's been around for a long time. They hold it up on every item and they show who is voted in favor and against or abstained. We don't do that, but it's for people that are actually watching and are there at the moment. So I think Nanaimo's is relatively simple, but we have to look at the costs because we're different municipalities.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was surprised when this came up because I asked for this in the first term and I was told IT was working on it. So I'm really glad that Councillor Pope and Councillor Back have brought it up formally because I was pushing for this in the first term. So the only concern I have about it is what's been expressed by Councillor Hanson as well as Councillor Murray is that you can be in favor of something, but unique circumstances can cause you to vote differently about a particular spot. So without the intent, as Mr. Stewart has mentioned, and without proper presentation, as Councillor Ma has mentioned, it really doesn't tell you much unless you're one of those people who are actively involved. I would like to think that maybe staff can figure something out about that because otherwise the public may get distorted views about some things, and I don't want that confusion to happen. So it has to be simple, but it has to be purposeful. And I would also just like to say that, if we do establish something like this and the public is confused why a councillor voted some way, phone the councillor and ask them. So I think, firsthand approach, go to them and ask them why they voted some way. So that's my only concern is that what I've mentioned already. Otherwise, I'm in favor of being transparent and accountable perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Pope, second time.
I just wanted to thank you all for your support on this. I just wanted to add that I feel like I have a lot of confidence in the voters and residents in the District of North Van to have the good sense to figure it out. Like, you can call a counselor, you can email a counselor, and many do already with me even. And so if they have some confusion over why a counselor voted on a certain way, there's many avenues and courses of action that they could take. Yes, I support, I think the data needs to be presented in a simple way, for sure. And that's what we need staff to figure out. But I think people can figure it out, but we got to start somewhere with transparency. So thank you.
Councillor Beck.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your support. I do think this is a step in the right direction and just in terms of making this sort of information easily accessible. And I do hear what's being said around the nuances around every decision. But I do think having a tool like this will just make it easier for people to go back in, find the meeting, watch a video clip if they need to kind of pick up on some of those types of things. But thank you very much for your support.
I will be supporting getting more information on this, but I'm still, I think maybe I'm just old. There's something visceral and honest about somebody standing and putting their hand up to vote and making it, you're standing up in front of public and you're declaring your vote. And so, I don't want to see that put to the side for electronic voting and recording necessarily. I think that, the first thing that popped into my mind was when Metro Vancouver directors a couple of terms ago voted themselves a pay increase, and there was no recorded vote on it. They just took that the consensus of the room was that there was going to be a pay increase. And then when the matter was returned to tally the vote, all of a sudden everybody forgot the position they had initially and decided to rescind the pay raise that they had. And so there's no question that putting the vote up front and in people's faces will help keep all politicians honest about the decisions that are taking place. And when there aren't eyes on those decisions, then you can have things slip through. But I still, I don't want the technology to become disruptive to the meeting. And I also don't think that the technology addresses the nuance issue that's been raised. I know Councillor Hanson, you yourself have had some very well-reasoned, nuanced positions on some developments down on Marine Drive where you were pushing for a higher ratio of rental and the developer didn't get the higher ratio of rental. This would make it look like you didn't support the affordable housing, even though what you were doing was fighting for a higher ratio of rental. And so in its effort to simplify, it actually may mislead. And so that's always going to be the challenge. I do think generally making it easy for our community to be able to access the data and to be able to walk back through our voting records is probably a good thing. But I think that it doesn't replace somebody witnessing the discussion that happened or being able to click on the video and be able to watch the discussion that actually occurred. Or reading the minutes, although the minutes don't always capture the nuance in those kinds of votes. And so that would be my worry, that it would simplify it too much and might give a false impression of what had actually happened around the council table. But I support us looking into it. The intent with this technology was to make it more viable for us to be able to do that in future when we could do it equitably for hybrid participants. And so I'm optimistic that we can get some feedback from the staff about the potential for that. Councillor Forbes, second time.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to mention something that I would really appreciate, and I know that the public would appreciate it as well. Often when I go back to pull up something, we don't have our topics segmented in the video feed. And if we could segment each topic when, item 8.1, 8.2, people could then go directly to that and not have to start spending an hour scanning through the video to find where we talked about something. So I would really like to recommend that, along with this idea of setting up this kind of thing, that to make our website more user-friendly and not waste people's, I won't say waste, but I mean, if they're only looking for one thing, they may say, well, I'm not going to scroll through that whole 2.5-hour meeting to find out where they talked about it. So I'd like to recommend that staff also consider segmenting our topics on our video feed so that people could click in and get just what they're looking for. Thank you.
Bookmarks on the video so
Yes.
that you can skip to the different items of interest. Mr. Stewart is madly taking down notes. Fantastic. I see no further speakers at this time. I'm going to call Mr. Stewart.
I'm just going to say, excuse me, I'm going to get one of these two put in the same location. Segmenting the videos with bookmarks might make it really easy for us to, on a cumulative basis, summarize all of the decisions that are made. And then if somebody wants to know what was said or not said and why somebody voted, they could, rather than having to call you up, they could actually go onto the website and look it up. So.
Thank you very much. I see no further speakers. I'm going to call the question on the motion. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, next item up for discussion is the Housing Central Pledge. This is brought forward as Councillor Back's motion. Councillor Back, your opening comments.
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. This was the housing pledge that was put out by Make Housing Central, which was the BC Nonprofit Housing Association, the Aboriginal Housing Management Association, and the Cooperative Housing Federation of BC, three organizations that are focused on nonprofit affordable housing. Came out during the election campaign, and several of us around the table here signed the pledge, including myself and Councillor Pope, Murray, and Councillor Hanson. And really, it's about adding a focus to creating more affordable housing and using the tools that we have as a municipality, a local government, to do that. So some of those things including rental housing, streamlining municipal permitting and rezoning to fast track rental housing, something that we have to some degree been doing. And in fact, many of the aspects of the pledge are already in motion. The work is started by our staff. But I feel that by endorsing this as a council, we are making a statement that we are committed to doing our part to create more affordable housing in our community. But most of it is in the report, but welcome any questions from around the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder on the matter? Second by Councillor Pope. Councillor Pope, any comments?
Yeah, I totally support this. We urgently need more rental housing in North Vancouver. Been reminded of it once again by two recent apartment fires in North Van, including the fire a few weeks ago at the International Plaza, where dozens of people remain displaced, including the family of the young girl who was hailed as a hero. Talked to the family this afternoon, and they have nowhere to go in another week. They were paying $1,800 a month at the International Plaza in a one-bedroom suite for 4 people, 2 adults, 2 kids. They're both working parents. It's all they can afford. Obviously, we have an affordability crisis in North Van. They've got a lot of people working on trying to find them housing, including North Shore Emergency Management, which has done an awesome job of taking care of everybody for a very short period of time on emergency funds. But it's families like this that are in emergency situations. It's businesses who can't get workers to move here because they can't afford it, so they're short-staffed. It's seniors whose children can't afford to live close by. There's so many reasons why we need and urgently need affordable housing. And so I'm hoping that this will, if this direction will move it forward once again. I do note that in Councillor Back's recommendation, there are already 5 existing policies on record, including the official community plan and the updated OCP action plan of 2021 that all align with this same recommendation before us. And I'm new here and I'm still trying to figure certain things out, but I really don't understand why these policies have not moved forward at all. How many more reports do we need to tell us we desperately need affordable housing? So the direction, I think, is there for staff to get moving, and it's been clearly detailed in countless previous documents. So hopefully this recommendation will get things moving on affordable housing and especially on rentals. So I support it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to push back on that just a little bit. I mean, many of these things are already happening in the District of North Vancouver. We have, on many occasions, contributed land through leases to developments to produce housing, nonprofit housing, and low and deep dive subsidized housing in many cases as well. There was a period of time, 17 years, where not a single purpose-built rental building was built in the district of North Vancouver. And in 2007, the first council that I was a part of, we broke that with production of a purpose-built rental building up in Lynn Valley at Evergreen. And we've been intentional about advancing purpose-built rental projects as we go. I have some concerns about the pledge, and I did not sign the pledge in the election for those reasons. One of the recommendations is actually illegal. One of the recommendations says that we would fast track things that were approved in the official community plan. You cannot fast track a rezoning. Rezoning has to take place. The council cannot abrogate their duty to consider a matter through rezoning. And so sending that to staff, delegating that power to staff is not lawful in the province of BC. The question about waiving development costs and charges, that's always a decision that council has to face. And I would say that the provincial government is paying the development costs and charges in other municipalities. So why would we give them a blanket clearance to not pay for them in the district of North Vancouver? That means when we waive those development cost charges in the district, that means it has to be picked up on the taxpayer's dime through your property taxes. Other municipalities are benefiting from the provincial government paying those fees. And so I don't know why we would carte blanche approve not having those fees because the province is paying them in other municipalities and not in ours. I think that it goes a little bit too far in that it's including market rental into the mix. Some of the market rental in our community is extremely lucrative. It is not affordable in any way, shape, or form. The new product that was produced in Lower Lynn Valley was produced at $4 to $4.50 per square foot per month. That means a 500 square foot place was coming in at about $2,200 to $2,500 a month for 500 square feet. Just because something is rental does not mean that it is supportive, does not mean that it is affordable. And so I didn't appreciate that being included in the housing pledge at the time. There's several reasons for this. We have never had an Indigenous specific housing policy in the District of North Vancouver. We obviously, through our official community plan, do recognize inclusive and diverse aspects of our policies, but we've never specifically had a just Indigenous housing policy only as being a policy of the District of North Vancouver. So there are several things that were in the Housing Central Pledge that I didn't feel comfortable supporting at the time. I still think our council is quite reasonable, ready, and able to make decisions in the moment, considering the facts of those specific cases. And so an overarching pledge, I don't support. In this case, with 45 seconds left to comment on, I will say that also, I think it's important for council members to retain their unfettered status. Which is when you come to this table, you are not committed by obligations outside of this room. That you come to the table to hear what is being presented, to hear the advice from staff, to hear the advice from the community, and then make your decision. Committing to pledges of, sometimes they're quite benign in nature, but sometimes they're quite specific about the action that you will take in each and every single vote. And I would encourage you not to sign on to those pledges that fetter your vote or recommend, not just recommend, but really put a tremendous amount of pressure on you to vote a particular way on every single project, despite the facts of the individual project. So I have hesitations over it. I didn't sign the pledge in the first place, and I won't be supporting the council corporately signing the pledge at this time. Councillor Hanson, your comments.
Thank you very much, Mayor Little, and I respect and agree with much of that you have said. At the same time, I don't view this pledge as fettering my vote. I reviewed the pledge carefully during the election. I did sign the pledge. I support the pledge. I signed the pledge out of increasing awareness of an increasing community concern around affordable housing. I communicated the pledge as part of my platform. It was on my website. It was on my social media. I mean, as much as I respect some of your specific comments with respect to the pledge, I take the pledge as putting forward a main idea, which is that we are to shorten the timeframes and streamline the process for the creation of affordable and rental housing. And I don't see it as fettering us beyond that. It's, from my point of view, a statement of intent in that direction. And I believe that idea of shortening these timelines and streamlining this process to create affordable and rental housing is widely supported in our community. And for that reason, I'm happy to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murray, your comments?
Thank you, Mayor Little. I concur with your comments, and Councillor Hanson, I signed the pledge in the same spirit as you did, with the intent of bringing awareness to more affordable housing and looking at the issues that surround that. Clearly, as Mayor Little points out, I'm not going to be handing over my job as a municipal councillor in the role of zoning to staff. That is why I exist here. That's our major role as municipal councillors and mayors in the province of British Columbia, across the country, is zoning. And so I don't support delegating approval of nonprofit and co-op housing developments that are consistent within the plans. As Mayor Little points out, it's against it's against our legislation, and it's not staff's job to do that. That is why we are elected. And I concur to the work in regards to the unique needs of Indigenous people in housing. I mean, we don't have those policies. There's, many more, amounts of work to do in that regard, working with our partners, working with BC Housing, working with First Nations to be able to address those issues. Over the years, the District of North Vancouver, we are criticized because we're vocal and because we take risks and things. But if you look across the North Shore, we are the only municipality for decades that has given land, because we have it, to nonprofits and have built low-income housing. And one of our proudest accomplishments has been partnering with the Lions Club, Seymour and Lynn Valley, in building low-income housing, hundreds of units of low-income housing, primarily in the Seymour, but also in Lynn Valley. And why were we able to do that? Because we had land, because we didn't develop all of it, because, people like me, I don't mind saying that. I pushed back against market development for years. I've been doing that since the 90s. And I fought more subdivisions on the mountains of Seymour, protecting mountain bike trails, protecting hiking trails, trails for horses and trails for us to recreate in. And I was not in favor of going and sprawling even more. It's not a good way of planning. So I fought that for many, many years. And I'm glad I did, because now we have land that we can, look at carefully and put it to the use of people that, are really in need of it, lease it, and we do that now. We certainly look at waiving the costs behind permits and development cost charges for nonprofits. Why would we not do that? That's just a partnership that we have with all sorts of different groups. When we talk about fast tracking development for rental housing, and again, Mayor Little points out, what kind of rental housing is that? Is that market rental housing because it's unaffordable? We talk about a one bedroom for $1,800. That's unaffordable to so many people. Fast tracking, I will tell you, we had a project with BC Housing down on 16th for women and families to build a facility to house women challenged, struggling, and it is still not built, and that was 12 years ago we approved it. So you can fast track things, and they don't necessarily happen overnight just because you want them to. It's a complex place we are in right now. Speculation has driven land values up through the stratosphere. That's why there is no affordable housing, in my opinion, because the land value and speculation has driven, I'll take my next 2 minutes. Because land values and speculation assessments are out of control. When we built the OCP in 2010, our director of planning, Brian Bidwell at the time, phoned to BC Assessment and said to them, if we start building high rises down on Mountain Highway in Lower Lynn, are you going to assess the airspace parcel? And BC Assessment said no. And he phoned again to double check. Are you going to assess the airspace parcel and tax the property owners of commercial properties on that airspace? Meaning towers that may never exist, the property owners where those towers could exist would be valued and they would be taxed. I'll give you a quick example. Dykoff nurseries that existed for over 50 years were paying $250,000 a year in property taxes selling geraniums because BC assessment told us one thing and did another. So that created an increase in land speculation, in valuations of properties, excuse me, and drove up the cost of everything. We have built more housing in the District of North Vancouver or on the North Shore in the last 10 years since the 1950s, and we are more expensive than ever. Supply and demand does not work. So we have to be in charge of using our land to make sure there is a place for people that cannot afford those towers and those expensive single-family homes. And that's what we have done for decades in the District of North Vancouver, and we will continue to do that. We have land down on St. Denis, we have land down on Mountain Highway, we have land in Maplewood, we have land at Seymour, and I am happy any time of the week to partner with nonprofits, the Lions Housing Society, Kiwanis, the Rotary Club, to build housing that we actually need, instead of more investment properties that we're probably a bit full with right now. We could take maybe a bit of a break. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. Councillor Ma.
Thank you. Thanks again to Councillor Back for the report. As someone who has worked for BC Housing for 6 years and attended 3 Housing Central conferences, I do have firsthand experience with the good work done by the BC NPHA and ALMA to advance affordable and Indigenous housing. I support the intent of the report. And not because I don't value our staff, but I do have some concerns about the delegation of council authority to staff. In my opinion, an OCP is an aspirational document that provides guidance. It does not get into a very specific level of detail, especially when looking at specific properties. There's a lot of nuances. People often refer to an OCP as a living document. So if we were to pass on this responsibility to staff, we would be asking them to identify and interpret the situation as it changes. I believe that responsibility should remain with staff. However, with these comments, I do support this motion and look forward to seeing the staff report on how to implement potentially parts of this pledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ma. I'll make one additional comment. Sorry, unless Mr. Stewart, you want to respond to that?
Thank you. Councilor Murray mentioned that her job was to make sure that she's in control and council's in control of development and decisions. My job is to express to you any concerns that I might have. And in this particular case, my concern is you're making a pledge that you may not be able to keep. And in fact, it's likely that staff are going to come back with many of the instances where we may not be able to meet the aspect of the pledge. We should not, in fact, meet the aspect of the pledge. In some cases where we cannot meet the aspects of the pledge. So, I mean, if the motion is to support it in principle, because it's the intent to move this along, and as Councillor Back has said, we're already doing a lot of this. That's going to be pretty easy, and we could probably identify things that are consistent with the pledge that we can do and that the council can act on. So with those words, I'd just like to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart, for your comments. Councillor Back, did you want to follow up?
Well, just want to thank those of you around the table who supported the motion and appreciate the caution from Mr. Stewart. I think there are going to be some challenges, but it is about the intent of affordable housing and doing what we can to make some of this happen a lot faster than it is. And I think maybe some of these items, like the issue around the unique needs of Indigenous people, maybe that is an opportunity to be able to reach out to First Nations and have that sort of discussion to see how we can partner. Yeah, appreciate that we may not be able to do everything on the list. Lots of it we are already doing, and I look forward to a report if this is supported from staff. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Forbes, your comments?
I won't go over everything that some people have already said, but I will say that I agree with the points that you made, Mayor, and I also agree with the points that Councillor Murray has made. I'm going into my 5th year as a counselor, and the last term, we approved, at least I've been told, and I also believe it, and I've looked it up as best as I can, that we approved more supportive, more affordable rental housing than had been approved in the last at least the last 2 terms before us. So if you go back and you look at the last council's goals that they set out for the 4 years, that's exactly one of the things we set out. So, I believe I would like to move faster, but for reasons of things like partnerships, even though we may want to move faster, our partners maybe can't or don't want to. So it's not always us who slows things down, and I would like to have done even more in those 4 years, but I continue to support affordable housing. And my definition of affordable, I know there were some councillors last term who kept saying we haven't defined it. Well, we haven't defined it as a total council, but I've always defined it as related and tied to income. So we do know, though, that there's no housing right now that I can think of in North Vancouver, the district, that's affordable without some sort of subsidy. Whether it's us forgiving costs, whether it's provincial coffers kicking in for something, there's nothing affordable in the district of North Vancouver right now. So our goals, we have always been striving since I've been on council, always been striving for these things. We fulfilled most of them. I agree with the comments about delegating to staff. I think the reason we're elected is because of our voting record and how we feel and our land zoning. And I think that should stay with council because we're the representatives of the public, not staff. Staff does their job well, but they're not the elected representatives. The other thing is, this is all well and good, but there isn't a pledge for infrastructure. And so if we're going to build more, we need to pay attention to our infrastructure crisis. The Lionsgate Bridge is an example, just in the last week for the second year, of a major problem with infrastructure. That's out of our control because we don't control that. That's the provincial government. But still, it affects all of North Vancouver. It took some people till 2 o'clock in the morning to get home. So that's not acceptable. So we have to consider, along with housing, we have to consider infrastructure. And this is a perfect example of where you might vote one way, but feel another way. I'm totally in support of affordable housing. I'm totally in support of co-ops, rental subsidies. I'm totally in favor of that. But I'm not going to support this pledge. I didn't even recall this pledge because it came at a time when councillors get flooded with things to sign on to just as an election is happening. And so I may have received it and just didn't get to it, but I didn't sign it. And now that I've gone in and looked at this and I went exactly to the website and looked at it, I'm not comfortable with handing over some of the decision-making and the nuances that might happen in this district. So I won't support this. And I would like to say 2 things. One is that the newspaper article that was published over the weekend online referred to all housing. And I'm not in support of market housing before we get more rental and affordable housing. I think that covers it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my second 2 minutes here is not going to be anywhere near enough to address these issues. But I mean, if anybody needs to be making a pledge on this matter, it's the provincial government, because they are legally responsible to provide social housing in the province of BC. And it'd be the federal government, because the federal government is the one that's driving the affordability crisis. The federal government, when it brings in 500,000 people through immigration this year, 2.6 people per household, you're going to have to produce 200,000 units in this country to address the new immigration that's coming in, which may be absolutely important and great and something we need to do, solve some of the demographic challenges we have, but it has to be supported by the federal government. They have to send the money to the communities that are building those. Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and Calgary are overwhelmingly the places where new Canadians are coming to, and those communities should be supported with a commitment from the federal government to help fund and lower the cost of housing. Otherwise, all you're doing is superheating the bottom end of the market and making it impossible for people to get ahead and impossible for governments to be able to provide people who are in a core housing shortage now, because you're too busy trying to address the onslaught of 200,000 additional units per year that we must produce. You're never getting on to actually supporting the existing problems that are occurring in our country. And so I appreciate the priority for making housing central. It's what we do here on a weekly basis is try to get the best deal we can for our community going forward. But I have some serious hangups over this pledge, and think that it's directed in the wrong direction. It should be directed towards the provincial government, who are legally mandated to provide social and affordable housing, and the federal government, who are, through their monetary policy and the immigration policy, are largely driving the housing shortage that we currently have at this time. Councillor Pope.
Of course, I can't let that go unchallenged. If we wait around for the feds to come up with some money for affordable housing, we're going to have 10 times the people in desperate need that we have now. Not going to happen. I really feel like this is not about whether we support affordable housing or not. It's about trying to find innovative ways to move this forward, to make it happen more quickly. And very much like the election campaign, when everyone said they were in favor of affordable housing, yeah, who isn't? But the difference is you stop putting up barriers to make it happen. You find innovative ways. One of those innovative ways is to enable staff to do what they're really, really good at, which is assessing these applications and moving them forward. I don't think previous councils have done a very good job of moving these things forward. And we are in a housing crisis. Like, I don't know what part of that people don't get. Like, it's a horrible, horrible situation for many, many people. And we just simply have to do things differently. And those are my comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pope. Councillor Forbes, second time speaking.
I'd just like to push back on that because I realize you're new to council, Councillor Pope, and I don't know how much involvement you were in following council before that. But as I said, we are working and we are coming up with innovative ways and we are partnering, and it isn't always us who slows down the process. It's sometimes partners that we work for this kind of subsidized housing. So we're all in favor of getting it going faster. We've done, I think this council has paid attention to getting this done. Like I said already, it was the goal at the beginning of the last council. It's still the goal. Nobody's against affordable housing. Nobody is putting up roadblocks to affordable housing. We're looking for solutions. We're looking for ways to speed it up. We're looking to get more partners involved. So I just want to push back a little bit with what we have done so far in the last 5 years.
Thank you. I see no further speakers on the matter, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried with Councillors Forbes, Murray, and Little opposed. Okay, and the next item that we have is item 8.4. This is the Edgemont Boulevard 30K pilot and traffic strategy. Councillor Murray, this is your motion.
And it sounds like everybody supports it, so it's going to be a quick one. Right? Thank you, Mayor Little. I'd like to move the recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Forbes. Okay, your comments, Councillor Murray?
Thank you. I was approached by the Edgemont Business Association and some local residents in the community in regards to the speed and concern of safety within the village. There was actually a recommendation brought forward by staff several years ago. There was a concept of lowering the speed in the village, and at the time, the Edgemont Community Association was not in favor, although it was not unanimous by the Edgemont Community Association, Edgemont and Upper Capilano Community Association. It was not a unanimous vote, but there was a majority of their members that were not in favor at the time, and so staff did not pursue the 30 kilometers. The Edgemont Community Association, Edgemont and Upper Capilano Community Association has indeed concurred with my motion. They do support it. They did take a formal vote. The Village Business Association has had concerns for some time now. Robin Delaney, I think, was in the audience earlier. He had significant concerns in regards to the speed and the change of the village. You know, more, you know, a lot larger increases of people living in the area, new redevelopments, side road access, and particularly, you know, when you're backing out in Edgemont, you know, it's sometimes hard to back out into the village lanes, and you've got cars speeding through. I actually tried to drive 50 through there the other day, and it scared me. And it was at night. It was after the Edgemont Community Association's AGM, and I was driving through it. It was dark, and it was relatively empty. And I tried to drive 50, and I thought, this is way too fast to drive through the village. You know, there's a lot of seniors in the area now. They're taking longer to cross the street. There's parents with children. There's, you know, people walking their dogs. And the previous council at one point had contemplated a slow community and looking at 30 kilometers in a lot more varied areas than Edgemont. It was not supported by the majority of council at the time, but I thought it's certainly reasonable to look at a slower speed in such a busy area with so many things going on. There should be no reason why we can't slow it down. Mr. Mavinek has been very supportive and has provided insight as a professional engineer in regards to his perspectives on the side roads and how they access, and certainly preventing rat running through the surrounding neighborhood, because I know that's a big concern for the village residents and those that live outside of the village. So we have to get that right. I have included in the report that we work with this community association, the business association, and the local neighborhood to come together to look at ways to, you know, restrict the rat running in the area. I know the mayor is concerned about too many signs. Steve, we don't want a lot of signs, but we want them to be clear and we want people to know. We also do need some enforcement up there. Enforcement has to come along with it. And Mr. Parslow has been working really diligently in Delbrook in regards to slowing traffic down there. And we do need some increased enforcement. I think one thing that's changed with our community, and certainly this community is becoming very wealthy. You know, it was in many ways, well, certainly the eastern part of the municipality was, you know, where, you know, if you didn't have any money, that's where you went. You could buy a cheap piece of land in the old days, you know, in Lynn Valley. I think the Upper Capilano, because of its relationship to downtown, you know, was sort of always, you know, there was a different level there. But what has changed recently everywhere in the municipality is the type of cars people are driving. You know, I used to look in parking lots at the rec center. I'll take my extra 2 minutes. I used to
Actually,
look.
if I may, Councillor, so you are acting mayor right now. I need a brief bio
Okay.
break, so I'm going to give it to you, the
Yeah,
floor to you.
so I get to
and
speak
then
for another 10 minutes.
Councillor Forbes is up after you, and then Councillor Hanson, if you.
Okay, Councillor Forbes and Councillor Hanson. I used to look in parking lots to determine, like at rec centers, to determine the change in the community, what was happening. Used to be there was lots of Datsuns and pickup trucks, Toyotas, you know, maybe the odd Honda minivan. And then it went from Honda minivan to, you know, maybe the odd BMW and Lexus. You know, now like Mercedes is a basic one. They're cars that drive very differently than those old cars. You know, my Honda is a bumpy car, but a Mercedes drives really smooth. And I think there is some relationship to that kind of luxury vehicle. You don't really realize how fast you're going in it. You can drive them and you don't realize that you're going maybe 10, 20, 30 kilometers over where you thought was reasonable, even if it's 10 above the speed limit. So lots of things have changed. We need to slow down more. I think people will be supportive of it. I think it'll make a visit to the village a lot more palatable to more people. Backing out again is a concern, and I think we have to address the speed to make it safer for people that are trying to get out of the spots. And I hope council can support this motion. I certainly think the community generally supports a discussion and a one-year pilot to see if it changes the behavior of people. So now we will go to Councillor Forbes.
No 10 minutes? I seconded the motion, and I would like to say in a previous life, I lived 2 blocks from Edgemont Village on Ridgewood. So I am familiar from living right within the area, but I'm also born and raised in North Vancouver. So I'm really familiar with Edgemont and all the nuances of Edgemont. I think it's a jewel in the community. It needs to be, I hope it never loses that. And in the last decade, there's been an awful lot of change there that's sort of chipping away at that jewel. But I'm in favor of this motion because I could go either way on it in one way, because as a regular in that area, I know what to look for. I know where the dangers are, and I automatically slow down in that area because there's so many side roads, there's so many crosswalks, there's the cars backing out, there's so many possibilities for a tragedy that I automatically have always slowed down there. Most of the time when it's really busy, traffic is slowed down to at least 30K, if not lower, if not stopped when it's busy. But when it's not quite that busy, then you do get people that know that the legal limit is 50, and that doesn't make it safer. So in light of that, I think that we need to have a pilot for a year. We need to have 30K. We need to see if that makes a difference and if there's anything else we can do for safety, because we're developing that area and there's more and more population coming into that area. And it's also not the same kind of population that was there years ago. It's an older demographic that is downsizing, as has been said, that is living there now. So I'm in favor of the 30K. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hanson, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you to Councillor Murray for bringing this motion. I do remember the Salo community discussion. And for my part, I would be pleased to consider lower speed limits at different sites across the district. And I think it's something that we should consider. It makes our community safer. It makes our neighborhoods more livable. Mr. Parslow set out the pros and cons of being struck with a vehicle at 50 kilometers versus 30 kilometers. And as Mr. Parslow noted, the added driving time, assuming the one actually complies with these speed limits, is minimal. Edgemont, from my point of view, is a great place to start with the 30-kilometer initiative. And I do support the idea that we need more enforcement. So we're going to have to, if we're talking about making this meaningful policy, we're going to have to monitor the enforcement. But very pleased to support, and thank you, Councillor Muir, for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Back.
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship. Thanks, Councillor Murray, for bringing this forward. I have always been supportive of 30K speed limits. I think it should be the default on the majority of residential streets throughout the community. And thinking back to that discussion that we had around that, I would be supportive of looking at other areas where we can introduce this. I know it is challenging because everywhere where it's introduced has to be signed. So if you're looking at a big area, that becomes a challenge. I've always thought that Edgemont Village is a wonderful part of our community that is so car-centric, when it could be so much better if it weren't so car-centric and it was just a safe, comfortable place for people to walk and connect, as they do in certain areas. But it is very car oriented, as I say, car centric. And I think that there are more elements that it would be great if we could look at, and maybe this is just the starting point for that. But to look at how we can create some more, as I say, sort of people oriented areas. You know, I think about the pumpkin event that happens every fall where they close down a couple of blocks on Woodbine and how enjoyable that is. I just think Edgemont Village has so much more potential if we were to create safe spaces for people outside of their vehicles. So thank you very much to members of the public who supported this. Thanks, Councillor Murray, for bringing it forward, and very happy to support it.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ma.
Thanks to Councillor Murray for this report. As stated during the recent campaign, my 3 priorities are mobility, affordable housing, and supporting local economy, all with the ultimate goal of building community. This pilot speaks to 3 of those 4 items. First, mobility. It's about how we get around. And we do need to move towards a more sustainable modes. And when we do move around, we need to do it in a safe manner. I heard feedback from many residents about traffic safety, and not this in Edgemont Village. There's concern across the whole district. Delbrook, my own community of Pemberton Heights come to mind. On the second issue of supporting local economy, this proposal was brought forward by the merchants of Edgemont, so I take that into consideration. And finally, building community, a safer community and one in which people can get around safely is very important. I know there have been some concerns raised by some members of the Edgemont community, and I trust staff will address those issues. So I look forward to, or I do support this motion. Thank you.
Very much. So my own comments on the matter, I'm glad that it's framed as a pilot because there's something we have to watch very closely. When you're coming along Ridgewood or you're coming down Sunset, Edgemont, all the areas that feed into from the northwest side of the village. If Edgemont Boulevard is too slow, people will go Colwood, and we have an elementary school on Colwood. And so that's always going to be my concern, is that if it's too slow in this space, how much rat running is that going to press onto neighboring streets? And so I'd like us to keep a fairly close eye on that. My friends in the audience here, we have our school board chair, Culvier Mann, and our school board trustee, Linda Monroe, here joining us here today. We have to make these decisions considering the impact on the elementary school directly to the east of the site. And that's the first next space. If you go east of Edgemont Boulevard, it's to cut through Colwood, which has Highlands Elementary School on it. So I'm very concerned about that. I want us to be watching that very closely. I had mentioned I have some concerns about the signs potentially in and out of the area, because it's not just a sign for the speed limit, it's a sign in advance of the speed limit, and it's also a sign warning that we've changed the speed limit. So it could actually be a very imposing number of signs that we have to address this. So I do appreciate the pilot nature of the proposal, and we'll be supportive of it. I'd just like us to keep an extra set of eyes on what impact it has on Colwood specifically. I see no further speakers. Oh, Councillor Ma, your comments.
Just to the point about the pilot, the staff report coming back would also set up criteria for how that pilot's going to be evaluated. Would that be correct?
Mr. Joyce?
Through your worship, we certainly can do that. But typically we would do the pilot and report back after, as per the councilor's report here within a year. But we can send you an informational report of the type of information we're collecting, which would be speeds, volumes, some of the issues the mayor just addressed, our partners with the RCMP, and some basic information we'll be looking for as an informational report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ma.
We're going to bring Mr. Mavinik on for staff to help you just on a couple of these.
I've got a liquid wastewater treatment for Mr. Mavinik.
Mr. Mavinik's going to be busy over the next little while. Mr. Hollingsworth.
All right, I see no further speakers on council. I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor, contrary minded, motion carries. Thank you very much, council. And the last regular agenda item this evening is the East 29th Street delineator. I must say, I'm very impressed at how many people stayed through the meeting here tonight. They must be here to talk about this issue. Councillor Murray, I see you. It is co-sponsored with yourself and Councillor Forbes.
Yeah.
Councillor Murray, your report.
Yeah, I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, and seconded by Councillor Forbes. Thank you very much. Councillor Murray, your comments.
Mayor Little. this is not about having a bike lane or not having a bike lane. That's not what this is about for me. At the beginning of the last council, in the spring of 2019, there was a report that was being brought forward by staff, and the report recommended that a single bike lane be put on 29th on one side of the road. That was the report that came forward to council. At that time, Mayor Little was at a meeting in Ottawa with the federal government and TransLink, and I was with Metro Vancouver on a parks tour as a member of the Parks Committee. And the report was brought forward to 5 members of council, and the council of the day determined that instead of 1 lane on 29th Street, they would go a step further and put 2 lanes on 29th Street. Now, staff had worked with the residents in surrounding 29th. They had gone to consultation prior to this report being brought forward and asked them what they thought about having this 1 lane on 29th. And I think generally the community felt like 1 lane was okay. There was still going to be some parking on one side of the street, and that was the report that was brought forward. The community was caught off guard when council determined that they thought it would be better to take all the parking out and put in 2 bike lanes. And when the mayor and I came back, I was really disappointed, because my whole role of being here is to be the voice of the community, and process is important. And when we go out to the community and ask them what they think about something, and then we bring it back, if we don't think that that's the right direction to go in, then we need to go back to the community and say, oh, hold on, you know, we thought maybe 1 lane was good, but now we'd like to do 2. What are your thoughts? How is that going to impact you? That's exactly what we did a year and a half ago, 2 years ago in Lynn Valley. We didn't want to repeat 29th Street because the community was so negatively impacted by all the parking taken out. There were properties that had rear access with stairs to their house, but no front access anymore because of the bike lanes, and family members in wheelchairs could no longer go to those homes. And the ladies in the audience right now, because they couldn't get the wheelchair up the back stairs of the back lane. We had accessibility issues with Handy Dart. Sorry, I'm always talking to my people, but I'll talk to my council instead. I apologize. So this is just about, you know, let's build a bike lane on 29th, a multi-purpose bike lane. The city of North Vancouver does it everywhere. They have parking, a bike lane, a sidewalk. It was about money. It was about money, I think. That's why it was just taking the parking out and, you know, not wanting to construct a multi-use pathway. We went out after that very upsetting situation that the residents of 29th had to deal with. And I will tell you, there's not many issues that get a local community riled up. This was one of them. They have not let up on this issue for nearly 4 years. They have come back multiple times to council to plead with council to say, is there a way for us to deal with this? And at one time, we had a vote, we brought it back, we had a vote, it failed. We asked staff to come back with some solutions for some, at least, you know, laybys or some parking pockets or ways for vehicles to stop. I'll take my second 2 minutes. To stop on the side of the road so people could get, you know, deliveries. So, you know, taxis could park. So we could have Handy Dart park, you know, so there could be some access for residents that live there. You know, why do we have to impact one group of people negatively in order to benefit another group of people positively? Why can't we just have a middle ground and all share, right? Somebody said, the gentleman in the back, we're all neighbors and brothers and sisters and uncles and grandmas and friends, and we're all supposed to be working together. And I hate this divisive tone. I hate it. It's happening in politics across this country. It's happening in the United States. It's happening around the world, where there is one side, you're on this side or you're on that side. Why can't we just be in the middle and try to work together? And that's what we did on Lynn Valley Road. We went on Lynn Valley Road. We went and talked to the residents. We designed the road on both sides. So there's a bike lane on both sides, but there's laybys, there's some parking, there's bus stops, there's parking for businesses. Why can't we get there? Why does it have to be this fight? Because we think we're going to solve all of our problems if we take both sides of the road on 29th and our problems are all going to be solved. It's just created more problems. I have a duty to represent all the people here, whether you vote for me or not. My role is to try to figure out a solution to our problems with those gentlemen in the back, Mr. Stewart, our council. I don't see why we can't find a middle ground here. It's going to cost some money to put a multi-use bike path on the south side of 29th, and there's going to need to be a consultation process in regards to dealing with that. But for the time being, I think there is a reasonable need for us to be able to support residents of 29th, like we did on Lynn Valley Road, have some fairness here. And while we work towards a solution, so we have bike lanes on both sides of the roads without impeding the use of residences, local businesses within those residents, and the needs of those residents, we need to put some parking back on 29th.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry, just trying to clarify. Who was the seconder on the report? Was Councillor Forbes. Councillor Forbes, your comments followed by Councillor Hanson. Councillor Forbes, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm in a rather unique position to having to do with this 29th because I was a new councillor and I had been away from council for a little bit before this came up because of a broken ankle. And I voted at that time with both lanes on 29th. And I own that. That's the way I voted then. However, I'm quite willing to admit my mistakes when I think I've made a mistake, and I think that was a mistake. I have had quite a bit of contact with people on 29th, and I've reached out to the local neighborhoods around 29th and listened to them and what their problems are after this went in. Because, you know, 29th is a border between the city and the district. The city takes over about at Dutchess, but it's a center line of 29th, about at Dutchess and going west. So some of the issues that staff had worked with the city staff that was going to happen up on the upper part of the 29th bicycle lane haven't happened yet, but that's not in our realm because we're the district, but we were trying to align with the city at that point. Some of the things that I just want to make perfectly clear, which I have always said, I'm for active transportation. I'm for the environment. I'm for people getting to move around in their neighborhoods. I'm not against any of that. And I will say this, I know, although I did a spreadsheet on the responses that we have gotten, I did a spreadsheet on it, and it's overwhelmingly that people want these things removed. But it's the people that are within the neighborhood, not necessarily just 29th, but also within the neighborhood. And there are cyclists that have also said to me, remove the delineators. So for me, this isn't about parking necessarily. This is more about accessibility, ability for services to be rendered to the people in those homes. Because I talked to a nurse says that she has difficulty finding parking and then having to walk to try and provide those services for that person. So I don't think it's fair that we take away their ability to access their own home and have services brought to their own home, whether it's taxis or deliveries or Amazon or anything like that. And what is happening right now is those vehicles stop and they park blocking either the traffic already or they block the driveways. So they're finding their own way of parking right now, and that's not safe for the bicyclists either, because what happens when they do that is the bicyclist is then forced out into the traffic anyway. So I just want to make it really clear that I'm not against anything, I'm in favor of things. And I just want to make sure that everybody has their issues respected and listened to and dealt with. And the other thing that I've always said since I've come on council is that the OCP is a guiding tool in what we should do. The OCP directed that our cycling routes be accessible for all ages, all abilities. You can't take, I'll take my 2 minutes now. So to me, that means families as well, children as well, should be able to ride on these routes. And I understand the perspective that a lot of cyclists, commuters and dedicated cyclists going to jobs or whatever, they want the fastest, the most direct to get there. But in our OCP, it guided us that these should be transportation routes for everybody. And so that means that we need to make them safe for everybody. And I wouldn't take my child on 29th, whether it had delineators or not. That's not where I'd go. So one of the things that I have always been looking for is, do we have to put it on arterial roads? Number one, there's all these issues that we're talking about. Number two, all the gases that the cyclists are exposed to when they're riding on our arterial roads. So I'm looking for a middle ground as well, where maybe it isn't, our routes aren't always on the arterial roads. Maybe they're on side roads where we can do it so that everybody can get to enjoy that route. And so I would like to call for a review of the master bicycle plan, because I also agree that it's disconnected. The whole cyclist route is disconnected all over the district. And that has to do with budget constraints, planning constraints, different councils being involved on it, but it's disconnected. And it's been a long time since there's been a review of that master plan. And so I would like to suggest that we have a workshop that would be open to the public, and we review that master plan and we come up with some new ideas going forward on that. So I think I covered everything that I noted down here. Oh, the one other thing I'd like to say about the surrounding neighborhood is we haven't solved the problem. All we did was move the parking into other neighborhoods that didn't have problems. So we also need to address that before we start making decisions about where it's going to restrict parking in areas. We have to look at the impact on areas around the area we're trying to deal with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Hanson, your comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Councillor Murray and Councillor Forbes, for your motion. I'm not going to be supporting the motion, but I certainly appreciate the goal of addressing parking and access concerns for residents on 29th. I've walked this section of roadway a number of times, and I am sensitive to the issues of access and parking. And I agree also, Councillor Murray, with the comment that this could have been done better. We could have introduced all of this in a manner that was more with more consultation and participation by the community. However, I'm not going to be voting for the motion that's on the table. If in fact there is a better route and a better option for a multi-use pathway, I believe that has to be in place before removing this cycling infrastructure. I believe that we must forge ahead and importantly be seen to be forging ahead with respect to active transportation infrastructure in the district. In my view, it would not be consistent with this stated goal of expanding our active transportation infrastructure and building a more complete set of cycling routes throughout the district to remove this bike lane at this time. As for the needs of the residents, with respect to snow removal, surely we can prioritize snow removal in the lane behind 29th in this section. It seems to me that's an achievable goal of the district. And I would also encourage the district to consider any reasonable parking and access accommodations that could be put forward and benefit the residents. And we heard earlier in public input that there were 4 residents in particular that were most profoundly affected in this particular section. When we're dealing with these relatively small numbers, it seems to me we could develop a plan that would provide special accommodations to them. So as I say, thank you. I appreciate the spirit of the motion, but I believe if we're going to stand behind our goal of active transportation, we should not be removing bike path infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hanson. I've got a couple of comments and I'll start with some questions of staff just to clarify their understanding. So first, the question was raised about snow removal on lanes. Now, lanes typically are not built to the same road width standard. They don't typically have the same turning circle at the end of them, and they don't typically have the same storm drain infrastructure. What's the likelihood that we would be able to plow these with the conventional equipment that we have with the district?
Currently, Your Worship, with 11 pieces of equipment, we do not prioritize lanes. We do side street, which is actually a higher level of service than most municipalities. But we currently do not plow lanes.
Partial answer. You can't, without the turning circle at the end, we cannot turn around the big pieces of equipment, so they can't even be used in that.
Correct. We do have other pieces of equipment through the parks if council determined and sent us to do a particular area, that could be done.
The next question I have is about the length of it, just the distinguishing difference between what was consulted with the community at the original stage, which was 1 lane route through this entire stretch from Tempe Glen to Lynn Valley Road. And what Councillor Murray has proposed looks like that it's removing the southern section between William and From, which means that there is still 1 block of bike lane on either side, plus the doubled up block going into Tempe Crescent beyond that point. Is that your understanding, that we would still retain 1 block between Tempe Glen and William and 1 block between From and Lynn Valley Road? Is that your understanding of this, if this passes?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Is that your intent if this passes, Councillor Murray?
Surrounding between Tempe Glen and William was because of the right-hand turn lane that's in place. And so I thought we needed a little bit longer to assess how that was going to work. You know, the issue between From and Lynn Valley Road, I'll point out that there is actually parking on that section. And it's surrounded by multifamily with, you know, underground parking, and then they have on-street parking.
Okay.
So multifamily has more parking than single family between From and William.
You know, when we considered this originally, you know, I remember some of the things that I was considering on a rather busy road is how high do you rank storage of personal vehicles and the long-term storage of personal vehicles? And there are going to be cases where we have to decide to not deliver that. My house is an example of that. I do not have parking in front of my house because I live on Mount Seymour Parkway, which is obviously, you know, 1,000 cars an hour at its peak period going in front of my house. And so, so we've had to accommodate and adjust over time. And it's true, some of our houses were built to contemplate that. And my house has about 1,800 square feet of my own private property set aside so that I can turn around on my property so I don't have to back out onto the parkway. And so some people have had to make a fairly significant private contribution to vehicle management in those areas. I do recognize the distinction between long-term car storage, that being unfettered long-time parking, and strategic parking opportunities in a street. 2-hour parking in this spot, 4-hour overnight parking in this spot, mixing it up so that different types of services can be brought as close as they reasonably can be to the end users in the community. Just today, as I was coming through that space, there was an Amazon vehicle double parked outside the delineator on the uphill side. And so obviously that's an ongoing challenge because they didn't feel that it was close enough to be able to go up. I think it would have been just, well, they probably would have ended up on Shakespeare to park. And so I'm inclined to support Councillor Murray's motion. I do think that we need to bring back some options for the residents along this space. I think the downhill portion of the bike lane is not very effective. The people need assistance on the uphill side, and so having a dedicated separated space going up the hill makes some sense. Coming down in this stretch, generally people can keep up with traffic. And so I think that returning some of the benefit and flexibility back to the neighbors is reasonable in this case. We've studied it. I seem to recall one of the fall counts was 34 single direction trips in an entire day. So maybe 17 round trips, and we're having this infrastructure reserved for it. It did not seem like a very effective use of the space in that case. And so I'll be supporting the motion. Okay. I don't see any further speakers at this time. Oh, councillors, oh, everybody. Okay, Councillor Back, your comments followed by Councillors Ma and Pope. Councillor Back.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just listening to some of the thoughts around the table. So I won't be supporting the motion as it's being presented here tonight. I think it would be a step backwards for a number of reasons. And I've heard from a number of residents, as we all have, that this doesn't really represent a reasonable option, but it is actually a step backwards by the district in terms of public safety, and one that is contrary to so many of the district's policies, namely around climate action and creating a safe bike network for all people, people of all ages and abilities. I can speak as probably the only member of council around the table that uses the 29th Street bike lanes on a fairly regular basis, like weekly. And it is a safe bike facility, and one that I think is in time going to see a lot more usage. And one of the reasons that it's not seeing the sort of uptake perhaps that we would have thought is that because it's disconnected from so many of the other bike routes because we don't have a complete cycling network by any means in the district of North Vancouver, which in my mind is all the more reason to continue to invest in our active transportation projects so that we can build out and actually be able to get to places in a direct way. And in this particular instance, 29th Street is a direct route between two parts of the district that I don't think you could actually recreate in any sort of direct way using side streets. I do want to address the residents of 29th who have been strong advocates to bring back some parking and better access to their homes. I think the vast majority of people on 29th have faced an inconvenience by losing the street parking in front of their homes. But I think for a few residents along East 29th, it's presented a hardship, a real hardship in terms of accessing their homes and making it very difficult. And for those residents, I do support anything that we can do to assist in making accommodations so that you can access your homes easier. So I've made that comment, as has Councillor Hanson. I think anything we can do, whether it's to help with, maybe it's grants money to do, a lift or something like that. We are talking about 2 or 3 residents with those kind of significant challenges. And we did ask staff to come back when this was discussed to look at potential for drop-off zones and that type of thing. But what we're talking about here is reinstating parking for anybody, free parking on the street. And I don't think that's the intent in terms of addressing some of these issues. I think we need to look at maybe handicap parking, a drop-off zone, that type of thing. So I'll leave that point there. But again, I think we have to look at the cost. The reason that we did this bike lane project when we did is because it was part of a paving project, and to be able to add the bike lanes at the time was a way to do that without, the next opportunity might be 10 or 15 years before we could actually do that. So that's, again, part of the reason why it was done when it was. It wasn't identified as a high priority bike route, but it is in the bike master plan. And the timing made sense to do it then at a fairly minimal cost as opposed to trying to do it on its own as a standalone project. And while, it may be seeing a low usage, again, we need to see actual data when we make comments like that and be very careful about using sort of anecdotal evidence. But there are a lot of people that use it on a regular basis, whether it's going to work, whether it's going to school. And we've got Boundary Elementary that's right there. And it is a safe route for many parents and their kids to get to school. And to take away that safe route from those families makes no sense in my mind. And so what I would say is I'll take my additional time. If this is going to pass as it is presented here tonight, I think nothing can change until we have an alternative route that is planned out, costed out, And there's a timeline in place for that. But I think to take it away at this point and return parking is a step in the wrong direction for the District of North Vancouver. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillors Ma and Pope. Councillor Ma, your comments.
Thank you. First, I want to recognize all the feedback that council has received on this very important community issue. You know, in my opinion, it's kind of unfortunate this is being framed as either or us against them situation that's pitted neighbors against each other. As mentioned, mobility is one of the priorities identified for the district during my recent campaign. With respect to this particular item, I believe we need a network of bike lanes that's connected and coordinated with the city, regardless of current usage stats. During the past week, and especially today, I received many emails, calls on this issue. I've taken a call from a former councillor, visited the site with a local resident, and done some of my own research and spoken to staff. I've been told that there's some things that might not have been done correctly back in spring 2019 when the lanes were first installed. And I am concerned that the nature of community engagement and rollout of the current infrastructure will somehow negatively affect future projects. At this point, I don't feel I have enough information to endorse the motion to remove the delineators, but at the same time, I don't support the status quo. So I'm kind of in this dilemma or awkward situation. One of the options in the report was to have this referred to our workshop, where we can confirm the information that's going around and look at possible accommodation for residents. In speaking earlier today with the CAO, he indicated that this item could be scheduled quickly for a workshop. I'm also told that the city is looking at phase 2 of a bike lane along 29th Street. So I guess I have a question to the mayor. Is there a way or a separate motion to have a workshop and to have staff quickly come back with a report how we can preserve the two-way bike lane on the district portion of the street, but at the same time allow some residential parking? Like, I know there was a workshop done maybe earlier this year. I wasn't on council, so I'm not privy to all that information. So
what I would recommend is we still have members of the council haven't had an opportunity to speak yet. So when we get through that, then there is an opportunity for you to refer the item to a workshop. And if that gets supported popularly by the council, then the matter would be referred to a workshop. If that's not popularly supported, we'd return back to the initial motion that was presented in the original report. But I would prefer, before ruling on that specifically, to give all members of council an opportunity to speak to the initial motion. Okay, thank you. Councillor Pope, your comments?
Yes, thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Ma, because they are very similar to mine. I, at the core of it, feel very strongly that it's a huge step backwards to remove bike lanes for so many reasons that we've heard, that so many people have articulated here tonight and in many, many letters. And it really goes against our district policies, which clearly state that we need to provide more transportation options, et cetera. And we don't have data on how many people are currently using the bike lanes. But I'm also very cognizant of the neighbor's concerns, especially the neighbor who had an adult child with a disability who needs accessibility to visit. And, you know, clearly there are some flaws with these bike lanes, and I feel that we need to do our best to address them. And what I'm hearing from everyone here is that we all feel that way. We want to try and make it work. And I'm wondering a couple of things. I'm wondering if we can leave the bike lanes in and provide some mitigation for the seriously affected people, the people that you'd refer to as having extreme hardship. This could include things like building an accessible pathway for the disabled person from the back lane, ensuring that the back lanes are snow plowed, designating parking spaces on side streets for residents and deliveries. All of these things are options that I think could be more thoroughly explored before we take the rather drastic step of removing these delineators. And I think that the other factor that's huge in here is how dangerous it would be without those delineators, to take them down, not have another option for riders in place, parents with their kids cycling to school because they're in a routine and they don't have anywhere else to go that's safe on the bikes. I mean, it just sort of makes me really, really nervous and concerned about district liability issues, in addition to the dangers faced by riders who will continue riding, but not safely. So I was also wondering about a friendly amendment, and the possibility of that aligns with Councillor Hanson's suggestion that if we are to move ahead with the removing the delineators, another route must be in place. And so my suggestion for a friendly amendment, if I could mention it, is that we delete the first part of the recommendation, the last few words where it says, remove them with immediate effect. We delete the immediate effect and instead replace it with once an alternative route is built.
I think that dramatically changes the nature of it. And so much so that I think that we should probably test the first option. And I don't know that it would be accepted as a friendly amendment between the mover and the seconder. I also have comments from staff wanting to respond to some things. So Mr. Joyce, you did have your hand up. You've withdrawn it, or you?
No, Your Worship, I'm going to ask Mr. Cohen to comment on some early statistics that we do have. I mean, what council is debating tonight is similar to the discussion the councilors were here that we talked about the last 2 times on this issue. It's also a discussion other communities are having. At the end of the day, the core issues is parking versus dedicated bike infrastructure. At the end of the day, giving you right away and your travel lanes and your sidewalks. That's what we're left with. So if we were instructed by council to come back in a workshop format, we have a lot of the original designs. This has been looked at many, many times in many variations. So that work has been done, and we're prepared to bring that back to council should council decide a workshop.
So regrettably, I don't see a consensus forming, and so I'm inclined to go to Councillor Ma to hear his referral to a workshop. Mr. Stewart, do you have additional comments?
Your Worship, I looked at all the records this afternoon, and I was left with the impression that this was a very complex project with a lot of moving pieces and a lot of competing objectives that council and staff were struggling with in terms of how to deal with them. Irrespective of how this motion goes, and if it was passed, we would still come back to council before we actually went and did something. Because I want to make sure that council and the community is perfectly clear as to what, in fact, the result of the motion is. Regardless of that, I'm convinced, and some councilors have mentioned it, that we do need a workshop on the plan, and we need a discussion on the philosophy of active transportation, because I have seen us go back and forth like a ping pong ball on this over the last 8 years, and we really do need to settle on something and then do it well.
I'm inclined to suggest that Councillor Pope's suggestion is out of order because it does materially change the initial motion dramatically. I'm going to come back to Councillor Ma, who originally stated that he intended to refer the matter to a workshop. If you're going to make that motion, I will second that motion. I will second that motion. Any discussion on the motion of referral, or is there any discussion on referral, to be clear?
Can I just get some clarity on what that means then?
We're just going to get the clerk to comment on it first.
Okay, good.
Good.
Clarity, through your worship, clarity exactly on what? About referral to the workshop?
Yeah, and where that leaves this recommendation.
Yes, your worship, that stalls this matter, puts it aside. A subsidiary motion to refer it to a committee would take precedence. And until that's resolved, this gets parked. To summarize it bluntly.
No further action tonight. The item would be referred to a workshop for the council to make a future decision on it with the additional information provided from the staff at that time.
And your worship, referral under Robert's rules is debatable. However, we've been around many times on that, so.
I always defer and refer are actually two different suggestions, and I'm always unclear. This is a referral motion, is that correct?
That
to be referred to.
Referring it to a committee, which is our workshop, our committee of the whole in essence.
And if I can add something, given the nature of how long this issue's been before council, I'm told council is a continuing body, so I'll use the word council. But given that this has been before council, I would request also that this be scheduled at the earliest possible date. I think you mentioned early February. That we can.
That was in reference to public hearings.
Okay, sorry.
I'll have to take direction from Mr. Stewart.
We'll work to get it in the agenda as early as we reasonably can.
Workshops into March. Yeah, we'll have to create a date, yeah.
Your worship, we have a fairly light agenda for the regular meeting on the February the 6th. We could probably put a workshop into that if we had to.
My only concern is I don't want to rush if staff need time to actually look at alternatives. I understand the comment that you had already looked at alternatives at the time, but okay, if you feel that's satisfactory, you can meet those kinds of dates.
We'll be ready for.
We'll get it on the agenda as soon as reasonably practicable with that noted. Mr. Clerk?
So we need to vote on the referral
Correct.
to a
So it's
workshop.
been moved and seconded. We're now in discussion on referral. My additional comments on referral. I remember the discussion very clearly that we had the last time, and all of the alternatives that were put on were horrifically expensive. Each lay-by was going to be in excess of $30,000 to construct a lay-by in this place because of the locations of the storm drains, because of the locations of the sidewalk. Each time you pull out to create a 15-minute parking stall was going to be almost about $30,000. And so I don't hold out a lot of hope that we're going to be able to find on-street reasonable accommodations in the space to be able to adequately mitigate the hardship. But I'm willing to go to a workshop to hear all the alternatives again with the new council and make sure that people are comfortable with it. I just remember the numbers were terrifying. But I will be supportive of referring the item to a workshop. Anybody else on referral to the workshop? I believe Councillor Poke, your hand is up from before. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
no, I still want to add something to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Which is that, okay, we've looked at, I heard staff say that we've looked at this, the 3 ways to Sunday as to how to make it better. I don't think we've looked at it in terms of alternatives to provide mitigation for the homeowners. And that's where I think we need to really focus our new attention on. And that's what I'm most interested in seeing if we move ahead with a workshop.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forbes, your comments on the referral to the workshop.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will vote in favor of deferring it to a workshop. I would like to note that that was option 3 in this report, that it go to a workshop. And so I'll vote in favor of that.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Ma, I believe you've already commented on referral. I'm going to go to Councillor Murray first. Councillor Murray on referral.
So I think it's important to bring back how we funded Lynn Valley Road, because there was significant dollars spent in regards to that project. And I think I concur with Mr. Stewart that we really need to look at how we're going to be moving forward on increasing our bike lane connections and active transportation and not pit one part of our community against another. And I would just like to say to council that, I'm grateful for you to, be willing to go back and talk about this and try to find creative ways to address the issues of the people at 29th, because one neighborhood should not be treated differently than another. And the only way we can solve those problems is if we come together at a table and try to be creative and figure out solutions to these issues. And just saying that because it's going to be scary expensive, we can't do it. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. We need to do it properly. And we need to have, our community trust us with the direction that we're going in. And this has been a disaster. how it was implemented. And so I'm grateful that this council is willing to talk about it and find solutions. So I'm very in favor of the workshop going forward.
Thank you. I've got Councillors Back and Ma. Councillor Back.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will support a referral to workshop. I think any opportunity to talk more about how we look at active transportation is a good thing. I share some of your concerns in terms of landing on a solution that's going to work. In this case, it's not going to be extremely costly. And to Councillor Pope's comment, I would like to look at how we can work with some of the individual homeowners, the handful of whom have had, some real challenges. But I will support the referral to workshop at this stage. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ma.
Thank you. I just want to add, the staff have been very helpful in trying to educate me on this topic. So thank you, Gavin. I'm not a transportation expert. I don't have a PhD in transportation, but when I look at the existing path, especially from the city side, like I don't want to get into designing it at council, but there's just some questions that I would love to ask at the workshop. So just reiterating is, I think it's great. There's going to be some fresh eyes looking at this. So hopefully, this workshop will be maybe a better outcome than the previous workshop. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ma. Councillor Forbes, additional comment?
Yeah, I would just like to ask that we bring back the master plan, master bike plan. We need to look at all the things I've mentioned before. We need to look at connecting. We need to look at the OCP direction, that it doesn't always have to be arterial if we can find another route. So I would like to have the master bike plan brought back to that workshop so we can discuss that as well. Thank you. It may be longer than one workshop, but I do think we should start on that road because as Mr. Stewart has said, we need to get, and you've said, it's been a long time and we seem to go back and forth. We need to get together and come up with something that we can all semi-agree on. Thank you.
I'm sure we can present it in the context of the Lynn Valley portion of the master bike plan. It probably would require more time to look at obviously the whole plan in earnest, but in the context of the Lynn Valley portion would be great.
We would provide council with the background on how we got to where we are and what the current policies are, and then we'll probably set up another workshop to get into the whole issue of the philosophy of active transportation, the plan itself, and some of the obstacles we're finding in terms of implementing.
One last thing I want to mention, when I regret that Councillor Murray and myself didn't attach numbers, but there are numbers, there are statistics, and they've been reported to me throughout this period. So it's not like when we say there isn't good use of 29, there are actual data numbers that staff has that they can provide, and those numbers I'm sure they'll bring back to that workshop. Thank you.
Yes, and there was a report to council that included those numbers, which is where I got the 34 trips number that I came up with. It was from the report, from an earlier report. So at this point on referral, I'll call a question on referring the matter to a workshop. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. The matter is referred to workshop. We will advertise when that workshop takes place, but it'll be as soon as reasonably practical. We'll look specifically at the February 6th date, but we'll get back as soon as we can on that item. Council, we've completed the regular business of the meeting. At this point, there's an opportunity for reports. I would like to open up the reports by stating I was very excited to watch the Team Canada win in the World Juniors, and very excited, wanted to pass along my congratulations to the entire team, but specific congratulations to Lynn Valley resident Connor Bedard, neighbor of my friend Linda over there, from the greatest little street in Lynn Valley, Kilmarnock over there. And so it's been really great to watch their success over 2 weeks of competition. It was a lot of exciting fun, and look forward to seeing his career go forward from this point. Would any other members of the council or Mr. Stewart, would you like to make any reports?
Just a brief I'm going to get this changed. Just a brief report, Your Worship. Councillor Pope mentioned the displacement that we've experienced with respect to the fire. Nasimo has been working very, very hard to find short-term accommodation. We're at a point now between fires in the city and in the district. We've got approximately 200 people and family displaced, and we are finding it really challenging, in fact, to find long-term accommodation for these people. We are going to be setting up some meetings with the province because we feel there's a gap in their service. And in particular, the amount of work that staff are putting in to finding accommodation, we're going to be asking the province to fund additional staffing to help us to achieve that. I just wanted to provide that update.
Thank you very much. Okay, next I see Councillor Forbes, followed by Councillor Pope. Councillor Forbes. Oh, no, a report from Councillor Pope. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to respond to that. I'm very glad to hear that. But I, like this particular family is out of their motel room that Nassim's been funding January 16th. And so is there anything we can do?
Your Worship, Nassim has been talking to the province, and we're not going to be evicting anybody. They've indicated that they were willing to continue to look at extensions until we can find some kind of a solution. So we were concerned about the deadline of the 16th, but the response that we've had from the province is in fact that they will continue to do extensions while we try to find a solution to this problem.
Let's be clear that that's not indefinite. That's something they're all working towards, that extensions reasonably will be entertained.
Yeah, I think we also have to recognize, though, hotels as a method of dealing with are really not appropriate for families, particularly if there's not cooking opportunities. And the idea of having food vouchers and paying for hotel rooms is actually way more expensive than other alternatives that we've been looking at. So we are looking at all those.
Okay, other reports that members of council would like to make? I know I'm going to be doing a number of events this week recognizing Lunar New Year with our Chinese and Korean communities over the next bit. So my congratulations to the Chinese and Korean communities and people who recognize Lunar New Year over the next week, 10 days. I look forward to supporting them. I have a fun event this week. I'm going to be going into an economics 12 class and talking about the amalgamation of the city and the district and why we separated historically. And I think that will be an entertaining discussion. I wrote a paper in university 20 years ago about the 1906-1907 split of the city and the district. So I'm going to be going into an economics class and talking about that and the history of that, which I think will be a lot of fun. This last week also was able to again host a Meet Your Mayor, which we had at Parkgate. 3 or 4 times a month, I do an open public Meet Your Mayor session in the District of North Vancouver, typically at the Parkgate Senior Center, the Lynn Valley Library, the Edgemont Capilano branch of the library. And now we've added some dates to the new Lionsgate facility as well. So people in those neighborhoods have an opportunity to drop in and ask their questions. This being the first meeting since the Christmas break, I did also want to mention that I was our official representative. I didn't see any other members of council at the Penguin Plunge on New Year's Day. I was there, I went in, and I just don't recall seeing any of your smiling faces there. It was a ton of fun. We had Gary Como and the Voodoo All-Stars playing music. We had big bonfire and hundreds of people coming out, both as supporters and plungers, and just for a fun event. So my thanks to Bob and Ariane for all of the organizing that they did down in Deep Cove to pull off that event. This was, ours is always the sort of second largest plunge event on the West Coast. Typically, I remember just before COVID, we had 600 swimmers go in one New Year's Day, and that makes us the second largest in BC. with the English Bay Plunge being the largest. So people in North Vancouver, take it seriously, have a little bit of fun with it, and it was a great event. I look forward to seeing all of you there next New Year's. There's a pledge we can all get behind, right? Any other members of council wishing to make a report? Councillor Mah.
Actually, your visit to the economics class just reminded me of something, and it's actually more of a question. I've had a request from some schools to have a tour here. Is that something that I?
Yes, we can arrange for that. And yes, we have had classes here in the past, or I also go to classes, elementary school classes in particular, quite often when they're doing their government unit in grade 4 or 5. I'll go around to the elementary schools as well, but whatever you have in mind, let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, council, I see no further reports. So once again, thank you very much to council, the public for participating through, and of course to staff for preparing the reports that helped us make our decisions tonight. Although it was almost all council reports tonight. But thank you all so much. Have yourselves a fantastic week. Good night.